Welcome to this 20th meeting of fiscal year 2015 of the Milton Planning Board. I'm Alex Whiteside, the chairman, and with me are members Emily Innes, Brian Furs, Assistant Town Planner Tim Zerwinski, member Mike Kelly, and the board's historian, Ed Duffy, who is with us for the last time as a member of the planning board, and he has made clear that he doesn't want any fanfare. But we would be remiss if we didn't make clear to Ed what a pleasure it has been to serve with him. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and everybody. And may I say a few words?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll say goodbye and thank you to my staff and colleagues that are sitting here, and Bill Clark, who's upstairs, and young Tim over there who's learning, and everybody I'm sitting with here. I thank all the town departments that help us all day long. If you ever watch the mechanics of how things go here, all day long everybody's helping each other. So the building department, the assessors, the selectmen, and so forth, for all their kind assistance. People in the street talk about us a lot. If you're out there, just listen. If they know you're on the planning board, you're going to get an earful. Fire nursery and the Henry's plant are the favorite topics. I think it tells us something. I suggest that when I'm gone and we can have a night, we don't have a formal agenda, we can talk about how we do things, perhaps, and try to make this a better, easy to understand and easy to get a final resolution on some things. Just talk about it and talk about it some more, have the public invited and so forth, because this is difficult stuff and it's hard to get the best answer. We work hard at it, but that doesn't always happen. That's just a suggestion. And I also want to say that we have to plan, and anticipate and adopt and be proactive. Down in East Milton, we had what I would not call a good result of a major building down there. Because it was in my district, I'll take the fault for that. We should have anticipated. We didn't. We didn't do anything to plan for a better outcome than what happened down there. I think alcohol in town there are too many. We don't need them all, and I don't think it's best for our town to just keep making new places. So thank you. I will slip out quietly during the meeting, and thank you very much, everybody.
Now, we do have minutes, but they're not before us. And
February 12th minutes, which I think everyone has had a copy of, and I have an official copy that we can have the
an
secretary
official
sign.
copy for the secretary to sign if we approve them. What do you think? Shall we approve the February 12th minutes? I've reviewed them. They seem to be okay.
Yep.
They're actually probably ready for approval last meeting, but slipped through the cracks, as it were.
Well, it hasn't slipped through the cracks at this meeting, so we'll entertain a motion to approve these minutes.
So moved?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So you can sign those, Ed. Now, we're going to meet on Monday, May 4th at 6:30. And the first order of business is going to be reorganize the board. And then we are going to hopefully discuss how we are going to proceed in preparation, not for this town meeting, but for the October town meeting, because it is getting close. Surprisingly close. And I don't think that we will meet again before town meeting, unless, well, I don't think we will. So, let's see. Then we're going to meet again on May 14th, May 28th, and June 11th, and possibly at some time in between. But those are our regularly scheduled events.
Alex, excuse me, where will we be meeting?
We will be meeting in the high school in a room to be determined. Probably our usual home economics room.
I'll see if I can book that one.
I'll bring the dough.
Juice and cookies.
All right. Let's see. What we're going to have a master plan report, please.
Is that on the agenda?
You know, A, not on the agenda, and B, you've got 6 minutes for citizens speaking.
Oh, we have citizens speak. I had totally forgotten. Let's. We need a citizen, at least one citizen, to speak on a matter that isn't on our agenda for about 6 minutes prior to our first public hearing. So what citizen would, other than that, we're going to have a master plan update.
I'll give you enough.
All right. Anyone want to be heard on a matter of importance and interest? Or interest? All right.
Looks like I have a 6-minute.
Master plan update.
All right, so as members of the board probably know, we had accepted some comments from the final plan that you received in December. Those comments are currently being incorporated by Tim into the master plan. They'll be reviewed by our master plan consultant, and boom, it's on.
But
It flipped off, okay. All right, let me start over again. So,
right at the very beginning.
so the master plan is currently being revised based on some comments received by members of the board. Tim's doing a great job on that. The master planning consultant will review those revisions, and I would expect it to come to the board for a vote in May. So that's where we are with that. Coming out of the master plan, and to follow up on what you alluded to as our topic for the May 4th meeting, is there were several recommendations in the master plan for possible zoning articles for October. And throughout this past year, I think we've all been taking notes of other articles that might come up for October. So I've made a list of them, given them to Tim. Alex came up with some as well. So what we're going to do on the 4th is we're going to talk about what those articles are, see which ones the board feels is a priority for moving forward for October, and then, lucky all of us, start assigning them out for research. So the list is longer than I think town meeting has an appetite for, but it should give us plenty of choice for discussion and for assignments. So be prepared.
And the interesting thing is that even if we were to cull the articles,
Yes.
then citizens who disagree with our choice
Yes.
could easily come in with a citizens article on the one of the culled subjects.
That's always a possibility, yeah. So that's something we might want to take into account. If there's something that people have been talking about, we should, and we know that that's been a subject of discussion, we should make sure to look at it carefully before deciding where it goes. Anything that we don't do for this town meeting is obviously a potential for the October 2016 town meeting as well. So, but I think the prioritization will be an interesting discussion. It's a long list, so town meeting will have a lot of zoning articles for October. And he's smiling because he's not going to have to do the research.
Well, I was at a school where one of my classmates had just been kicked out of the school, and he came down to French class, and the teacher was assigning things, and whenever he said, "Who wants to do this?" Rufus would raise his hand. "I'll do that, I'll do that." Rufus volunteered to do practically everything,
I can
The
imagine.
teacher was a little absent-minded, didn't really notice what was going on, and it worked out beautifully.
So, well, I think the list will be a good one, and we had talked last fall about doing some, so we usually come up with our list, we bring the articles forward, they get on the warrant, we then have our public hearing and then go to town meeting. One of the things we talked about doing last fall was having 1 or 2 public meetings prior to putting these onto the warrant to get some feedback from people before the language actually goes onto the warrant. So I imagine we will be scheduling those. I think the warrant is usually the very beginning of August. So there'll be summer meetings, but it'll be the possibility for people to give us some feedback.
This will be good. Now, it's time for the town planners report. 2 minutes, Bill.
I'm going to pass and go to Tim.
The assistant town planners report.
I recently attended a workshop at the Commonwealth Archives about a historic preservation program that the Commonwealth runs that I'm going to be sitting down and talking to Bill about shortly. It's a pot of money that I don't think that Milton has taken advantage of. Basically, any property that we own that's on the state registry, we can get funds to either do pre-development studies for how to preserve it or money for bricks and mortar projects to actually, it's a matching program, but I think we have plenty of sites in town that we can put together a good application for, so I think it's definitely something that we should, I learned a lot. There's a lot of people around Eastern Massachusetts that have pretty good projects, but none better than ours, I think, so I think it's something we should look into.
Excellent.
That was an excellent report.
Yep.
Yep.
So
Does the chair have a report?
the chair is trying to see what time his watch says it is. Chair's watch is actually a little,
Oh, 6:45 on Brian's computer.
For the computer.
all right, but Comcast time is, of course,
Right.
our. So now we're going to do a public hearing on what I believe to be a zoning article, which is in your warrant, if you brought it. In your warrant is Article 47. And this has to do with declaring a moratorium on allowing certain signs, similar illuminated signage, prohibited signage, and cloth advertising banner. And it contemplates a 5-member study committee to look at the commercial signage bylaws and make recommendations which should be acted on by the town meeting. So, and the reason I think this is a zoning bylaw is that we have zoning bylaws that permit signs, and this would basically not permit signs. And it seems to me this would, if this isn't zoning, I don't know what it is. And the other thing is that if you say to the town meeting, declare a moratorium without putting it somewhere, like in the zoning or the general bylaws or something, just creating a moratorium in the middle of a space without having a cubby for it is, doesn't seem to me that would be a appropriate procedure. So, do we have a proponent to speak for this article?
There might be other people to speak of,
There might be other people where?
to speak about it.
Yeah, I'll ask
I'm going to be brief because you all have my things, and be grateful my printer doesn't work, so you're not getting any more pictures. But the Warren Committee comment before the hard copy came out was different, slightly different from this. So I'm responding somewhat to that. But anyhow,
Somewhat
first of all,
to the warrant, or?
different from this, yeah. The one that was on the website.
But these are the
This is
comments.
it, yeah. And
Okay.
anyhow, I don't think I have to go over the fact that Milton should be unique. We're not simply an extension of Dorchester and Quincy, not that I grew up in Dorchester and I love Quincy, but we're not simply an extension of them. And there's so many people that work so hard in this town to protect it, that it's just a shame that what has happened has happened. Be sure that what's allowed in East Milton will set precedents for Central Ave, Randolph Ave, Route 138. Now, this article, actually, what I need from the planning board is for you to adjust the article. It should say non-conforming signs, in that, on allowing non-conforming neon and LED signs. And neon and LED backlit signs is what that should say.
In place of what?
Nothing.
In place of what?
Okay, the town will vote to declare a moratorium immediately on allowing non-conforming neon and LED backlit signs, is what it should say. I thought everybody would know what. And the article would simply then say, it asks that the current bylaws be observed until a full study can be completed. The bylaws are not being observed now. About 2 months ago, the selectmen were asked, just casually, is it all right to put signs at an angle? And they nodded yes. So now signs at an angle are going up. Okay. Commercial banking and even gas stations can do very well without backlit neon and LED signs. This is evident in dozens of communities in Massachusetts. And I'll say Hingham because I'll pay for your gas if you want to go down there. Route 3A from the Weymouth line and into the Hingham shipyard are examples of successful commercial operations without neon LED signs. And actually, I made my daughter stop the other day because the gas station sign on 3A is lit by light bulbs, and it's no taller than 7 feet. And we have a gas station sign that's going in people's bedroom window, and that woman won't complain, unfortunately. The warrant committee suggests a moratorium, that there not be a moratorium, because it would deny commercial businesses their right to certain signs. These signs aren't allowed. I mean, I'm saying non-conforming signs that aren't allowed. So, I mean, all we're saying with the moratorium is observe the laws, don't give any special treatment till October. Now, the original, this thing lays it all on the selectmen. The selectmen are the ones who are allowing these signs. They're certainly working very hard, but I don't think the selectmen should be the ones. They have approved most of these signs. Some were installed without permission. The selectmen were asked to allow angled sign, and some of them were already installed. And the selectmen, without a vote, they just nodded and said, sure, go ahead. We have backlit billboards on 2 buildings, 2 Granite Ave and Adams Street. I would hope the planning board would recommend the moratorium, and that they would recommend that the planning board appoint the
We do
committee.
signs?
Appoint the, well, it's a zoning, you just said it's zoning.
You just said it. You
We
did
have
just say it was
zoning
a-
bylaws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sign bylaw is a zoning bylaw that's being ignored. And if you can't do anything at all, perhaps you could prepare a resolution for the Maytown meeting, just saying, hey, let's hold off on this and take a better look and let's protect our town. But definitely,
Well, you
the
saw,
planning
you
board.
saw my comments to you.
Yes, I
which
did.
suggested that maybe a committee would be in order to be appointed
By the
by
planning
by
board.
the moderator,
By the planning board.
by the planning board.
It's on my
Yes.
list of zoning articles to bring to October. So I'd
This
say
is-
at the minimum, we should limit it, we should have the moratorium go through October. And then we can decide if we want to restart the moratorium in October, or if we're going to bring our own
Right.
sign bylaw
We
forward.
have zoning that says if you want a sign, you can apply to the selectmen,
Right.
and the selectmen will
And
do
I
it.
wonder if that even
Do
had
we,
a public hearing.
What?
That's Article 7 of last May.
You're suggesting that
Of
there was no
October.
public hearing?
Well, when I asked somebody, what did the sign committee think about it, they said, oh, it was written so quickly, the sign committee never saw it. And I did ask one of the sign committee if they saw Article 7, they did not. I'm waiting to see when you held that
It would be
public,
in the Milton Times, you know.
when you had the public hearing on that
The
article.
I
ad
think it
would be in
was,
the
I think it
Times.
was September, or October, we had the public hearing on that.
You had a public hearing on
We
Article
have,
7?
we have to have, that was a residential sign, which went down at town meeting.
No.
Wait, which one are we
Article
talking about?
7 was the commercial sign that gave the selectmen
Oh,
all
that
the
one,
permission.
yes.
I think
Yeah,
they were
that was
both
a long
on
time
the
ago.
same,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
at
they
the
were.
same time.
Yeah,
Same
I was
hearing.
thinking-
Thank you
other
very
one.
much. If
Well-
nothing else, a resolution.
But, yeah, asking us to write stuff is, you as the proponent are supposed to write this stuff, and we are supposed to review it.
Well, I'm
I
asking-
have suggested to you that what you are doing by seeking a moratorium is impliedly repealing part of the zoning bylaw, which provides, well, you say that, but you may be wrong. Because it does seem to me, the zoning bylaw says if you want an illuminated sign, you go to the selectmen, you get a permit. And you're saying, we want this, we don't want this provision to be enforced, we want it repealed. Until such time as there's a committee appointed, until such time as the committee makes a recommendation, and until such time as the town meeting passes the recommendation. And it could be forever. You could be repealing the sign bylaw forever.
That gives the selectmen permission to allow illegal signs.
If they're permitted, they're not illegal. I mean, I don't, you're asking me to do something, I don't understand what the question, how to do it. I mean, I do understand that you could do a article saying we want to repeal these parts of the zoning and replace it with something. But I just don't see that this is a proper procedure. That's my own opinion.
Okay, well, I'll just say one thing, because I've taken too much time this time and last time, but in fact, if you could have town meeting approve Article 7 in May, then you could have town meeting do this in October. You can have town meeting do this in October, whatever month this is, May. But if
I
nothing
think the
else.
wording is such
Oh,
that
but
it
can
can't
you,
be.
are you able to
It's
add those
zoning.
words?
It's zoning.
Can you add those words? Non-conforming?
That doesn't, I don't think
Exactly.
that does it. That's just my opinion. The other members of the board may think that it makes it comprehensible and legal, but I don't think so.
I leave it to you. I didn't come to, I just came to
It's your,
present.
you are the
I just
proponent.
can't, there's other people who might.
Okay, who else wants to be heard on this?
So Amy Linane on Grafton Ave, East Milton. So I think it's been acknowledged that some of the wording wasn't probably drafted appropriately for this article, even though I feel there's plenty of support for this article. So when I read the warrant's recommendation to send it to zoning, my concern is, you know, I feel like I've watched the meetings over time and that nothing has actually moved. So we can certainly try to have a citizens article, try to revisit this, but then we have a 6-month gap between now and then. So is there, my question to the planning board would be, is there anything that the planning board can do to help, have another oversight? If we agree we can't do a moratorium, is there any mechanism to do another layer of oversight during this period? So that's one concern, and that's a question. So I think there's plenty of citizens that aren't thrilled with it, plenty. I could get thousands of signatures if we wanted to. But, what are our options as a citizen? How can we do that, and how can we have a sign committee that we have the bylaws, which are not always, it's supposed to be the exception, these lit signs, and it doesn't seem to be the exception anymore. So that's what I would ask, that's what I'm asking of the planning board, to help me, the citizen, understand the process.
Well, I thought I mean, this does talk about a study committee, and it seems to me that having a study committee talk about signs rather than a subcommittee of the planning board might be a good idea. But that is, that's my view. It seems to me that out of this article, you could say it does request the appointment of a five-member sign committee appointed by the moderator, and it would seem to me that that would be something to hold the town's feet to the fire a bit.
So as the planning board, is there a way to have that portion recommended at this point? I think the moratorium is what's causing concern, and that there's a conflict with the bylaw. I hear that in in the meetings I've gone to, and honestly, if you read the bylaw, I think we just have a shift in these approvals. I don't think historically the selectmen approved them, and more recently they're being approved pretty regularly. So there needs to be a shift or a discussion on this. So is there anything we can do to help between now and October? And if you're not the ones to ask, we'll have to research on our own.
Well, I mean, bear in mind, I don't think the warrant committee necessarily agrees with me that this is zoning, because otherwise they would have said, we don't have a recommendation from the planning board. My view is that it is zoning for the reasons I've stated.
Well, it's in zoning, right?
What?
Chapter 10 zoning. Sections of the bylaws, Chapter 10 zoning. So I would think it's zoning.
Well, I agree with you. There are others who are not so sure. It's a question. My own feeling is that you have, good.
I have thoughts, yes.
Good.
Would you like to hear them?
Good.
So historically, the selectmen are the ones who approve signs. Yes, it's in the zoning bylaw, but the way Milton is set up is the sign goes to a sign review committee to look at it, and then the selectmen approve it. So there's no capacity within this article to add a second layer of oversight between now and October. So I think you've probably got a couple of choices. You could certainly request that the language be amended and to include the non-conforming and the backlit that Laura mentioned. You could define how long the moratorium lasts, so you could ask that it lasts through the October town meeting, or probably better, you've got...
This is for the future. I just want to be clear. Are you talking about if we
I'm
did
talking about
another
what you could do
citizens
to
article?
this, what you could do to this article to make it work a little bit better.
For this town meeting?
Yes, for this town meeting, yes.
So a town meeting member would have to go to town meeting and do those things?
Right.
I'm not a town meeting member. I could not do those things.
You could have, right, you could have a
Okay.
town meeting member do that.
Or you could ask the planning board
Or you could ask the planning
do
board. We
that.
might
Right.
agree to do that. I'm
Right,
just
so
like,
that's, I think, I
Yes.
just wanted to be clear why we're here tonight, is that we've already talked about the fact that this article is not clear.
Right.
And that there may have been mistakes made. That's, this is a new process.
Right.
Right, this is not, I'm not an expert. And so now the question is, if we have planning board support,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you've heard many citizens over time talk about this as a potential issue. If we have planning board support, how can the planning board help us to move forward more quickly than October?
so this is what I'm laying out, and I didn't want to speak for the planning board when I gave the option. So either a town meeting or a planning board member could make a couple of modifications to this, stand up and make an amendment. One would be to limit how long the moratorium is. One would be to define who the committee is, and Alex and I probably disagree with this, so we'll have to talk about that. The adding a different layer of responsibility wouldn't be, the technical term is, within the scope of the article. So the article goes to town meeting members, they read it, they understand what they're going to be talking about. The idea of adding another layer of supervision is not on that, so it is unlikely to be able to happen. So then your choice would be, do you make the moratorium to October, a little bit beyond, and have a committee appointed by the moderator to work on it, or a committee appointed by the planning board or the planning board itself? As I said earlier to Alex, this is actually on my list of things I think
That's what I'm
your town
hearing.
meeting
It's
should bring
not-
forward to October. So it is possible that the planning board could move a little bit more quickly than a committee appointed by the moderator, just because the moderator has to appoint the committee, they have to get started, and the language would be due in August. So we could probably move a little bit faster, but it will depend on what my colleagues say as well, if they're willing to do that. That's about the limit of what we could do within the
That's a
article
lot.
as it is.
So I think that's what we're asking for, is that you have citizens that are expressing it, you have citizens that don't probably know the process as well as you do, and we're asking for the planning board to help us, because I think you've heard these concerns historically. This is not the first time you've heard it. This is the first time you've heard it in a formal way. So I think that I would like that to be heard, that's what we're coming to you for. And that's why we're here today. Obviously, we went to the warrant committee, and the issues with the article were identified. I hear that. That's not, I'm not hurt by those comments. That's what happens. So I just want to be clear on what we're asking of the planning board. And I think if the planning board is a piece of this, it's part of the planning board's responsibility to at least to act as, take the responsibility to say, we can do this or we can't do this, and we're willing to do this, or it doesn't fit into the schedule. That's what I would like.
So what is the, what are we willing to do for May?
It seems like what you said about, it's within the bylaw for somebody to go to the selectmen and have a sign more or less approved by the selectmen,
That's what it says.
even though the sign may be non-conforming.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that, like with the ZBA, when people go for variances and things that are non-conforming, they have to have a clear explanation of why they need to have that. It seems to me what's going on, and I can't say firsthand because I've never been to a meeting with the selectmen where they're approved a sign, but it seems to me that signs are just being approved without the person who's bringing it forward explaining why they can't stay within the conformity of the bylaw and put up a sign like that. Why they need to go beyond the bylaw and put up a neon sign or LED backlit sign. It seems like it's just, it seems like, I don't want to say the selectmen, but it seems like the bylaw is not working as it was intended.
What is the date of the bylaw? When was that bylaw last amended?
Just last year. But
Yeah, we did the
we,
breakfast for the
we have the head of the sign review committee here with us, and maybe he would like to come up and say a few words. John, would you?
And Ray Bill also on the committee.
Good evening.
Well, welcome.
Hello. Hi.
Hey, guys.
How can we help?
Could you guys introduce yourselves?
Sure. John Zickwitz.
Can I ask a question? When somebody comes forward with a sign and it doesn't conform to the bylaw as it exists, is it required of them to show a hardship of why they need to go beyond the bylaw and put up something different?
Are you speaking the sign design itself or the lighting of the sign?
Either.
Either. What we, what they do is submit what they would like to have for a sign. It seems like because of the size of the sign, most signs don't fit. I'm saying it right, Bill? They don't conform because if you look at our bylaws, it's such a minuscule area that you're allowed for signage. So most signs don't. And so the committee had put together a design handbook for guidelines on how to design a sign for Milton. So they usually go through these items, which are not part of the bylaw, and we review them based on this, and then we give our recommendations to the selectmen.
So, and you just spoke about size. That may be one issue.
Size, design,
Somebody may explain that, you know, if, like you stated, it's so minuscule, and I'm trying to advertise a business, it just isn't, it's ineffective.
correct.
Do they go on to explain why they need neon, or why they need LED backlighting?
Sometimes they do, yes.
Don't you believe they always should if it's non-conforming?
Yes. And we typically have a discussion on the type of lighting, how it should, that it should be, you know, softer lighting, not spill into the neighborhood, be appropriate for what they're trying to light, and we go through all those issues and.
Again, when I speak, I'm not speaking firsthand because I haven't followed this process, so I apologize for that. But it would seem to me that it would be either the committee or the selectmen's job to say, you need to show me a hardship. You need to explain to me why you need this, why you need something that doesn't conform to the bylaw as it exists.
Well, right now, there's nothing in the bylaw for lighting. There's no conforming or non-conforming. If I read it right, it just, everything with lighting issues goes to the selectmen. There's nothing conforming in lighting, there's nothing non-conforming in lighting. And that could use some meat. Because there's nothing right now when it comes to lighting. It just says all lighting goes to selectmen to review, and it doesn't say what's right, what's wrong. So we use our Ray design signs for a living. I'm an architect, so we use our kind of design intellect to see what would look appropriate on that building, how it would fit within the facade and the character of the building, and we make our recommendations based
To make
on
sure that it's dialed back appropriately.
So nothing is bright, and so sometimes our recommendations are accepted, sometimes they're not.
Because whether a sign is backlit
So-
or front lit doesn't necessarily affect the brightness or the impact that it's going to have on the surroundings.
Have you ever been overruled because you are too liberal and the selectmen think it needs to be drawn back?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, but the other way
It's
happens.
usually the other way.
I understand that it happens the
Usually
other way.
something we did not support and it got approved.
I mean, it sounds like we're being reactive, not proactive in our sign design. And certainly from my standpoint, it would be, we should be making decisions based on a better guideline that has some meat and actual enforceability as opposed to personal taste.
Again, I'm at a loss. I thought
Short term.
some period of time ago, we discussed some language that talked about lighting,
Yeah.
and that didn't get into a bylaw of any sort.
That was the one that went, that was the residential one that went to town meeting, and town meeting voted it down.
Did they
so-
vote it down or did they vote it back to planning
No,
board?
they voted it back to planning
Right.
board, which is, thank you.
And that was
Which
only
is why
relative
I
to
wanted it-
residential signing.
Yeah, I wanted to do a full review of both commercial and residential, and full disclosure, I've actually done some writing of sign guidelines for work. So I kind of have an interest in it.
It would seem to
setting
be the
up.
time to,
Yeah.
And I've actually done the same, so we can start building our committee
Yeah,
here.
and I feel that the sign review committee has had significant experience in seeing what types of signs have come to Milton and understanding the limitations of the current bylaw.
I mean, these gentlemen, like, a lot of people in Milton have
Right.
given freely of their time, and it's
It'd be
commendable.
nice to tap into that
But
experience.
it would seem that we also need to listen to the citizenry.
Right.
Well, I think also there's a lot of new technology that, even over the last 5 years with signage, has really changed dramatically, and I think our bylaws need to work to at least keep up with that and encourage best practices.
They need to encourage best practices, and they need to have a standard that meets with the rest of the town, so that one area is not getting treated differently from another area of
I mean, the
town.
reality is that once you issue a sign, once you grant a sign, you've got it.
Right,
It's pretty hard to
exactly.
get rid of them. Ask,
I-
ask Framingham, ask anywhere along Route
Yeah.
1.
That was said earlier, and, you know, lo and behold, again, we don't dislike our neighbors, but I prefer to ride down Randolph Ave in Milton to Randolph Ave in Randolph.
And
if we
we've
allow
got
signs in one
this.
area, like you say,
Yeah.
it's gonna
Or
populate.
even, in not even necessarily precedent setting, but just like it or hate it, the sleepy sign is not going anywhere. That's been made clear, that it's there and it's going to stay
We'll
there.
have it in, yeah.
And certainly there was a dialogue started around that sign just around town. I think we all heard it. So to the extent that there's a commotion going on, I personally think the moratorium is very appropriate on a limited basis, from a time standpoint, I wouldn't want to see this go much beyond October. And, I share Emily's concern just from a committee standpoint that I've been on committees. I don't know how you get anywhere by August with a committee.
Well,
So I'm not sure what
I was gonna say,
where that serves us.
A limit is obviously something that has to be there, but in
Right.
August, to me, would seem to be fair, and if it either came back to the planning board or went to a committee to, add language to the bylaw, if we were on the verge of accomplishing that and we needed a little more time, we could go back, revisit that in October,
Exactly.
August.
We could certainly get sufficient language in place for August that it would be minor tweaks for what went before the planning board, I think. And that design book that you guys have been using, I think, becomes a good basis, plus the experience you've had, and say, look, these signs that are coming to us are not conforming. What's the problem? What's good and what's bad, and how do we actually adjust our bylaws for that?
Well, how this got generated was when the selectmen first set up the sign committee. We looked at the bylaws, and there really wasn't a lot in there, so we took Brookline, Wellesley, and Hingham's sign bylaws, and we reviewed them and created this guideline out of those 3 bylaws.
It's going to be the basis for
And so that's how, because we needed something to judge signs against, because there
Right.
really wasn't anything. So if everyone got this when they applied for a sign, at least then everyone was being dealt with the same way.
Right.
It wasn't, everyone dealt the same way, because here, we'd like you to follow these guidelines. Of course, some people say, we don't want to, and that just goes to the selectmen.
So then
To
how
the
do we
ext-
recodify that?
Even to the extent that can be recodified to say that the zoning requires you to follow the sign guidelines, and then the sign guidelines can be updated on a periodic basis
Right.
It just seems to me.
by the sign committee.
If it's the case, and again, I don't follow it firsthand, but it seems odd to me if things go to the selectmen and they just approve things without understanding why this is so necessary.
Well, if it's not codified, then they don't have to
Basis.
approve the design. I mean, the guidelines is exactly, it's a guideline. It's, let's.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So then how do we give them the teeth in the zoning
Yep.
that allows them to approve something based on the zoning?
Not to drag this out, but could you just give us a real brief synopsis of the base, how many members are on your committee?
Right now, there are 3 members.
3 members, okay. So I mean, to the extent, Emily, that those members could be incorporated into any sign committee that may be a component of this planning board, and that sign committee may be how to best shape this committee.
I think that makes, that's 5 members right there.
Right.
There's 2 of us and 3 of them, and then we work on having some sort of public meeting prior to August so that people get a chance to look at a draft copy of what we're suggesting, and we can get some public feedback. I think that could work if you guys are up for it.
I mean, what we did discuss the petition, and we were looking at an even earlier one than it sounds like what has been discussed now, so we weren't quite sure what was the intent. We knew about some of the concerns about some of the signs in town, so the warrant committee asked for our comments, and so what we were recommending is some changes to the zoning bylaws. One, that, like the sleepy sign, that electronic message board, you just put it in the bylaw that you don't allow those anymore.
Right.
And just be done with it. Then we also recommended, let me just look here that was one.
Strengthen the definitions.
Yeah.
Because under definitions, what the different types of signs, whether they're freestanding, a wall sign, a pole sign, a directory, a window sign, the types of signs, the types of lit signs, the location for signs, rooftops, walls, lawns. We don't have any of this stuff in our bylaw.
Right.
The number of signs that can go on that a business is allowed. A definition of temporary signs, whether define them. Are they banners? Are they the feathers that we don't allow now? Are they A-frames, which seem to be prolific?
The other thing we seem to run into a lot in a sign committee is, as you mentioned, a sign gets approved, and then somehow it becomes grandfathered in. And I don't know why that should be. If the business moves out, the sign should go with them. It's really shouldn't grandfather in a sign.
It should really be written to the business.
So that should be, so that's something else we thought could be in the bylaws, where when the business closed down, building gets sold, the sign goes away and you start over again. It shouldn't, because we've ended up with bad signs because they've been on a building and we get told, oh, it's grandfathered, you can't do anything with it.
Right.
Right.
And I don't
Until you
see why
change,
that
but
should.
even just by zoning, once you change the use, that should eliminate that grandfathering, but that's a separate.
Well, sometimes it's not, it's a business to a
I
business, so the
understand.
use isn't changing,
Right,
but
I
the
understand.
tenant is,
I
so,
understand.
so it should go away with the tenant, or if the owner sells the building, something that building owner had shouldn't just automatically go to the new building owner.
Just another aspect of putting more teeth in the bylaw.
So would you have time to pull together a list of the things that you've noticed that are issues that we could
Sure.
use as a basis for a starting point? That'd be great.
Absolutely.
So how do we want to handle
What-
this?
Come on up and we'll get to you.
I think we want to
Send it back
have
to
the
us.
planning board address at town meeting that we'd like to have the,
Right.
And
On a
move
limited
that
basis.
microphone over a little bit so that we can,
So I'm trying to understand, it sounds like you're agreeing that this is a necessary process. That's why I just want to be really clear that because you have been the committee and I've read
Some parts
these
of
and
it are
these are.
necessary, I believe,
Right,
not
so-
the whole thing. I don't think the whole sign has to, I think lighting definitely needs to be reviewed.
Right,
Because
so
there's
the-
no guidelines right
and-
now as far
and-
as lighting.
Right, so that's what the not correctly worded article was that we need to review it and we wanted a moratorium on it. So,
But I'm not sure if I agree on a moratorium, because if you have a business that opens up and they need some lighting, what do they do if they open up and they can't get lighting for 6 months?
Well, I mean, I will say the nice thing about this, if we limited this to October, a fair amount of that period of time will have natural light through 8 o'clock.
Yep.
And, then you're really just dealing with dusk for about an hour. It starts to wane a little bit towards the end of the period, but at least you've got fairly good lighting
Yep.
through most of the business hours.
And if we support the change in language to backlit signs, then they could still have something illuminated from a light that sits in front of the sign or a downlit sign.
Right.
So it wouldn't be too harsh on them.
That's fine.
So, and then I think what we do, so we limit it to October, maybe November to give the AG
give the
time
AG
to
time to
review
review, right.
it, and then have it sent, rather than having it a 5-member committee, have it sent back to the planning board for study.
So my only concern with that, and I don't know if it is, I'm unclear on if things have gone to the sign committee and been approved, and I guess you're saying they had your recommendation or didn't have your recommendation, so do we have another outside, I mean, I'd be happy to be on a committee or somebody with another view, because, Blue Hills Bank, I almost, pulled over my car when I came around, there's a strip lit that was gonna blink on that.
That's not the sign, though.
So that's, I just wanna make
That's a
sure
different issue.
somehow
That's
they.
the building design, that's not the signage.
But I want to, I guess from my concern, if we've gotten this far down the process, I want to make sure those things are discussed, because I'm confused when I read, all illuminated signs require Board of Selectmen approval. In recent years, the Board of Selectmen has approved indirect, externally illuminated signs, but has not approved internal illumination. But all of a sudden, we have all this internal illumination. So somewhere in the
No,
last 4 years.
That's a difference in definition, is what you're hearing there. An indirect sign is a sign that's lit like the Catches Law at 2 Granite, because the light source isn't seen.
Yeah, no, we like the indirect lights. Those are the ones Fitness Unlimited has. We
No,
agree
those are
with.
direct lights.
Those are direct lights.
So,
Indirect is when it's behind it.
Indirect is the Catches Law sign that you don't like.
Indirect is
oh,
extra
that
space
is-
storage.
and it,
So ultimately, I think we need to review as
Some
a,
towns
as a,
don't consider that
Yeah.
to be internally lit.
That's where Bill's point about the definitions is critical.
need to go
make
through it
sure
all.
that
See,
they're-
those are the
right.
guidelines that you're reading, those aren't, that's not zoning you're reading, those are our design guidelines that we put together.
right.
As I hear it, there is a view that the planning board is willing to review this for October. You say you'd like some citizen input rather than just appearing at one hearing. You'd like someone to keep an eye on the planning board to make sure they don't go astray. I think that's what you say. And then I have this undercurrent that there should be a moratorium. And if there should be a moratorium, someone's got to draw the language up. I don't know how to do it. So someone has to do it, and we have to vote it tonight so we can get it over to the warrant committee.
I'll have a look at it.
What?
I'll have a look at it.
do you want to suspend this to a little bit later on tonight?
Well,
While you look
if
at it?
I would say that if we could do it for the end of the, if we could have the vote at the end of the night.
So
that
shall we
makes sense,
suspend
'cause
this and
we take a little
resume?
while, yeah.
We can,
Suspend the discussion.
I suppose making people stay here till 10 so that we have the vote on the signs.
Well, how would you, I mean, I
I-
can't write the language in 2 minutes.
All right.
So, but we could have a vote that we're going to support the moratorium, and then I can firm up the language.
Well, I think that's fine.
Well-
If you want to have a moratorium, I don't see how you can do it, so I will abstain on this vote rather than vote against it. But make a motion and.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing and suspend the discussion to the final agenda item on the meeting. Can I do that?
Making the people wait till 10 is not fair.
Can we,
Can we vote? and-
logistically, can we vote to
You just
ask or
I mean,
allow
just
Emily to
vote-
write language?
Vote to say that you're going to request a moratorium
Yes,
until
yes. And
October,
Emily's gonna write the language.
and that Mrs.
Great.
Ennis
Yes.
will come
I
up with the
withdraw my
language.
motion. Can
Yeah,
we rephrase?
I like
Right.
that. And to send it back to the planning board.
Then I make a motion to vote on sending wording to the town meeting that requests a moratorium on signs, and that Emily will,
Not on all sides.
no,
Backlit
no,
and
no,
non-conforming
Non-conforming
signs.
backlit,
Right.
yes.
Mr. Clark looks bewildered, as he should, but what's your question, Phil?
I think you're going all different directions. Your moratorium, are you using the language from the article?
No, I'm writing new
That's put forth?
language. So far what I've got is to see if the town will vote to declare a moratorium until November 30th, 2015 on the approval of non-conforming backlit signs and to refer the question of illuminated signage to the planning board for further study.
I
That's not bad
I
for
think
2
what
minutes.
John said is that there's no
There's
such
no
thing
non-conforming.
as non-conforming.
Oh, that's right. Well, then
Backlit
take-
signs there.
How about then just
Yeah,
backlit
it's a
signs?
misnomer.
well, is it non-conforming, comma, and back, because they're.
But there are
like I said, there's
LED
a size
signs
element.
too. The gas
Right, but I
station
think we're dealing
signs
with
are not
lighting issue
backlit.
Yeah, but
But LED is also used
Mixing.
to properly
I
light
understand
signs.
that, but the
We
gas
call it
station signs
So
are
you're
a
saying we should use the word
particular issue.
indirect signage?
Yeah, I know.
Is that the more correct term?
You know what? Different people use different terms.
It's
It's
very
considered
confusing.
halo lit a sign.
I know what halo it is.
That's what it is.
Okay.
And
And
that,
that's generally not
We allow
considered
that.
to be internally lit.
Right.
The internally
do
lit
allow
sign
that.
is like a
Right, I
Dunkin'
like
Donuts
halo
sign.
signage.
Fireworks base.
No, I like halo lit signing.
we encourage it.
Yeah, I would exactly would.
Approve that.
So I've got the basic language now, we just need to know what to call that piece that we're
I
putting a
think your
moratorium.
moratorium part, let's say the whole thing goes to town meeting
Yes.
in October,
Yep.
and it gets voted down.
Then
Is your
the mo-
moratorium still in place?
No, it ends
No.
November 30th.
November 30th.
I mean, you're holding hostage until we've got the new restaurant coming. We have a gas station that's changing signs next week.
Does it already have its
Well, that
permit?
it wouldn't be, the moratorium doesn't go into effect.
These are already in the business
until the
district.
AG approves it, which probably isn't until July. So it's really only going to be in fact July, August.
She doesn't approve
Well,
the
no,
stuff
but
from
if
May
it's
until
zoning.
September.
If
Well,
it's
September.
zoning,
It's going to be in effect for 1
if
month.
it's zoning.
Yes.
If it's not zoning, then it goes into effect right away.
I thought we
Yes.
agreed that this is zoning.
No.
No, it goes
I
into
gave
effect.
my opinion that it was zoning, and the
As soon as you,
Farm
as soon as
Committee
you
gave a
vote it,
comment indicating that it isn't zoning.
as soon as you vote it, it's enacting.
Oh, you think that
As soon as.
It's the same thing as somebody,
it
if you
is
write it,
zoning, the fact that we have
yes,
had the notice,
yes.
even though the notice doesn't say anything about.
If you say yes and you change it, you're making it starting now.
I do think the new restaurant could be a problem.
Well, it depends on what time.
The
the
new
sign
restaurant
will
hasn't
put
even
up.
pulled a building permit yet.
And have they
They have
even,
part of it.
Okay, the new restaurant's not going to be worried about signage for,
You have a
You're saying
question,
October.
Alex.
Yes,
leave that when I see
So,
it.
could I make a comment since you're well into your discussions about this?
of course, comment,
just talk.
speak into the
See.
microphone, and introduce yourself for those who may
Marion
not know you.
McKettrick, I'm an attorney in Milton. I used to be a selectman. I used to sit on some of these decisions. And I'm very happy to say that while I was a selectman, the Design Review Committee was created. It's a pretty good system, but it's not perfect because of exactly what's been said. Design Review Committee can make a recommendation, but the selectmen don't have to follow it. Any sign that is not allowed by our sign bylaw can be reviewed by the Board of Selectmen, and they can approve it. There's no limit to what the selectmen can approve. What's bothering me about this discussion is that the zoning bylaw says, designates the selectmen as the body to make that decision. So if you're going to have a moratorium, I think what you're trying to do here is, you're trying to say that the selectmen cannot make decisions about illuminated signs between X date and X date. No decisions, because the only decisions they make are decisions to allow illuminated signs. They're not allowed by our bylaw. So there may be something wrong with the way the proposal is worded, which is, as Alex is
That's what we're trying to fix.
pointing out, you're going to have to word the amendment correctly if it's possible to do it, and it may be. I agree with the spirit of this proposal for the reasons that have been explained tonight. I also have to point out, though, that I have been working with Seasons Hospice, which is building a new building on Randolph Ave. This does not present a problem for them if you set up a limited moratorium period. But should there be a situation where no illumination can be allowed for a sign for Seasons Hospice for a long period of time, I think that's a real problem, because that's a business that's in a residential zone. It's allowed because of various reasons. There's a charitable foundation that owns the building and so forth. If it operates day and night, and people have to be able to find it. So there will have to be some sort of tasteful illumination on that sign, and the sign review committee, they're hoping, will give some good advice about how to do that. So I first say I support the idea of a limitation on giving approvals for what I call lit signs. I don't understand this. When you're talking about different kinds of lighting, it's very confusing. If you're going to do this, you're probably going to have to say lit signs. They're not allowed by our bylaw. But you're going to have to look at the language of the bylaw and see what the authority of the Board of Selectmen is, and then you have to write the amendment to properly define that. Or it could be that you can't do it because it's too different from what's
I
been
thought it was my
proposed.
understanding that the bylaw doesn't address lighting.
The bylaw designates the selectmen.
Oh, I understand that part, but
As-
it doesn't really
The
give any
selectmen,
guidelines.
selectmen do not approve
It
signs.
doesn't give any guidelines for lighting.
Selectmen, that's right.
So if-
They're
if-
not
if Emily-
allowed.
If Emily worded it correctly, we could limit certain types of lighting, where if somebody wanted to put a spotlight at ground level up at their sign, that might be fine.
But
You
can
can
limit
certainly
types of
rewrite
lighting,
the
but you're
bylaw.
not gonna be able to limit the fact that people can light signs, because you can light them just as brightly from the outside as you can from the inside.
Right.
And I think
So-
I think that's what people have a problem with, is the type of light, not the fact that a guy wants to light the sign in
More
front
the
of the store.
brightness of the lighting.
It may be the brightness, but I think it's the neon and the Las Vegas type sign versus a nice wooden sign with a great big old bright light flashing, spotted on it so you can see it day and night. I think that's the difference. Maybe people that have come up and spoke against the situation that's at hand can say that that's what they do mean. Or maybe that's not what they mean.
And I think the confusion in the process is why this is taking so much time, and how the bylaw is written, and keeping this moving is very important. And I feel like the confusion just adds bureaucracy to
What-
it, so.
I think you've got a good argument, and I think we've got a good argument in the fact that the bylaw doesn't even address lighting. That's absurd.
Right. I mean, I think the easiest thing to do is to refer the illumination of signs back to the planning board for further study. That's the easiest, without writing the moratorium is
It's not our
the
intent
part
to
that's
stop
tricky.
someone from lighting their sign.
Right,
It's the
exactly.
style
Yes.
of lighting that works.
Look,
You how do you define that in
The
the
selectmen,
Well, that's what we're trying
the
to figure out.
selectmen are going to have to approve a sign, but
We're not trying to stop signs.
I understand
We're not
that.
even trying
The
to stop
selectmen-
illuminated
The
signs.
selectmen, I mean, a moratorium simply says the selectmen are not going to do their job, the sign committee is not going to do its job. I mean, we've got a.
No, they can
sign
still do their
com-
job.
Look,
We're just asking them to limit certain types of
all right.
signs for a period of time.
And, I think that the point has been made. I don't think we need a formal moratorium. I think that the selectmen will pay attention.
Well, my only
we
concern
ask-
about the formal
From what I
vote-
hear,
Yeah.
they don't take the advice of the sign committee, so I don't see why they would,
I will
in all
say-
honesty.
So can we ask for it to be added that the planning, that the planning board be added to the approval process during this period? So then, if you wanted to, I know that's,
It won't be within the
Way outside
scope.
the scope.
Yeah, it's
Look,
not within the scope.
If the
Fine.
zoning gets changed, it's going to happen in October. You know, if you want to do a moratorium, feel free, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
May I just make a suggestion, which is that at a minimum, the planning board should send a letter to the Board of Selectmen saying that they do not feel that they should approve whatever definition of illuminated signs you want. You could even just do illuminated signs. Any illuminated signs between now and whatever date you set in October, because you were reviewing the bylaw, there's confusion, there's concern, and it's an area that needs work. I mean, you know, yes, the selectmen don't have to do what you ask them to, but I think they'll listen to you.
And I think that you could have this letter ready at our next meeting.
Yes.
If we had
I
a
could, as a matter of
moratorium, they would
fact.
have to do what town committee told them.
And I
I
think,
like the stronger version myself, so I think we should move a vote. And
Yeah.
we have a lot more to do tonight.
so then can we change the wording to at least get the committee going? I mean, if the moratorium won't,
Definitely change the wording to have
So-
it go to
so
the
the
planning
planning
board for
board
further
will
study and
make
appoint a
that-
committee, yes.
and then a citizen will be a citizen member of the.
We'll add a
committee.
citizen member, yeah.
All right.
okay, Laura, do you have something to add?
Keep it with the planning board. We have a selectman, I don't know if we'll have a majority of selectmen who said, get out of the 19th century, get into the 20th century. Lead signs are here to stay.
Well, again, I think there's a misconception here. I don't think anybody is saying don't light signs.
No, definitely.
It's the method of
They've
lighting.
always been, I mean, you look at Fitness Unlimited, it's the signs over it.
Very acceptable
And
lighting.
they're beautiful.
Yeah.
And those people
But the
have to
bulb is
look at
LED.
have to look at a sign
It's still LED.
on a building
That's fine.
across the street for the expressway. They have to look at that. And as I read the sign bylaw, you're only allowed one sign on a building. I'm sorry I didn't bring the bylaw here.
Okay, now, do we have
Yes.
a motion as to what you want to do with this?
Yes. Well, here's what I want to do with it, so you'll see if you agree or not. Recommend that the town refer the matter of illuminated signs back to the planning board for further study. The planning board will appoint a committee, including members of the sign review committee and a citizen representative.
I think
Clean.
that
I'd like, I think it'd still be nice.
And we'll write a letter, but we'll do that
No,
before
I
town
think it'd be
meeting.
still nice if we added that in the meantime, there's a moratorium till, like you say, November.
I agree.
And again, it's not on lit signs.
On what?
On lit
I
signs.
think we could help, these gentlemen could help us word it correctly.
well,
Well, to
Why
Marion's
don't you-
point, I think it has to be lit or nothing, because at this point, there's no specification.
Right,
We don't
what's
allow
bad and
lit
what's good.
Yeah.
signs, so I don't think I don't want to be making the decision about what's bad and what's good without some more thought. I'm not going to make the decision sitting
But the
here.
question is, if we ban all lit, if we have a moratorium on all lit signs between now and October, what are the repercussions?
Even the gas station, I mean,
What
if
about
he's gonna
public
replace the
safety
sign in
signs?
kind, I don't see why that's a
It
problem.
exempts
Public
municipal
safety is
signs, we'd
all
have to put that in
exempted.
there. Well, we'd have to make sure we put that back in there.
Would you say, Bill, is a gas station, who else wants to replace the sign?
You've got the hospice, which is going to put up its sign. You've got the new restaurant, and you've got the new gas station.
I think Marion just said that, between now and November, she didn't think that would be a significant problem for them.
For the hospice,
Right.
but what about the restaurant and the gas station?
Well, I think if those people are replaced in kind, I don't think that should be a problem.
So you're saying they can replace in kind.
There's no sign on the new restaurant.
The new restaurant.
There's no sign.
No, again, are they gonna need a sign between now and November? I don't know.
okay, what is the motion?
Okay, so recommend
Just have it next week.
that we refer the issue of illuminated signs back to the planning board for further study. The planning board will appoint a committee, including members of the sign review committee and a citizen representative. Do we want to add the moratorium till November 30th
I think we
on
should.
lit signs?
I think we should.
All right, I'll put that in the, okay.
Till November 30th?
November 30th, give the AG time to review it. Town meeting's not till the end of October.
But once it's passed, then
Well, we could do it October 31st if you
I
prefer.
think that
I'm fine with October 31st, because that gives the
doesn't it?
selectmen a direction to be
The zoning
making their
reverts
decisions based
back
on.
to
They will
the
have
time
heard
of
the,
passage, once
Back
it's
to the time of
approved.
passage, but until the Attorney General looks at it, the Attorney General won't rule on October's town meeting until end of February, at the earliest.
fine, October 31st is fine. It gives the selectmen guidance at that
October
point
31st.
from the town meeting.
October 31st? All right, October 31st.
Yes. Second.
Motion made and seconded.
Okay, any discussion on, we have, look, the warrant committee is here. Hey, we're going to hear from the warrant committee. You are hiding back there. But you finally realized that you had to,
When you say for illumination for further study, I mean, is it going to make it clear to people, even
Welcome.
town meeting people, that it's not further study, it's establishing lighting guidelines?
And I don't think it should be.
We can do that in our comments.
All right.
Sorry, Ted, go ahead.
Well, I
why
think
don't you
I may
introduce
have
yourself?
something to add here. I'm Ted Hayes. I'm the chair of the warrant committee, and this is a vexed subject, no question. And we made our recommendation. Well, we did not like the idea of a moratorium, for starters, but we do recognize that this is a subject that should be addressed, and we thought that we should send it. We didn't want to send it to you. We thought, since the selectmen were in charge of signage, that it should go to them, and that they might well enlist your aid. Solution by October. A new article would be quite desirable, no question. But we didn't think that a moratorium would be necessarily helpful to that. In a way, adding a moratorium and then coming up with a good article by August, if that, the selectmen will know what that article says, and I would be very surprised if they went quickly to an approval phase on some sign to beat the deadline. You know, I think they would look at the article and go, "Oh, thank goodness we have something here to help us out." So I really think a moratorium is unnecessary, and it just ties people's hands in unintended. You know, there will be some unintended consequences, I'm sure.
I just, from what you said, I just feel a little confused by what the sign committee, who apparently were appointed by the selectmen, and informed us, and correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, that oftentimes, sometimes, the selectmen don't listen to them.
That's correct.
Well,
Ted,
Well, thank you.
what can I say?
You're saying they're going to listen to something that they're anticipating.
If they
Sign these
see an
guys.
article coming down the pike, that might get their attention. But I would, anyway, that's the way the warrant committee saw it.
All right.
Thank you.
And you're going to be heard on this at town meeting, and if the planning board comes in with a recommendation that the warrant committee opposes, you
Off we go.
have a 50-50 chance of winning.
Right.
Just how would your committee feel about based on the discussions you've heard, I'm not asking you to speak on their behalf, but about it being sent back to the planning board as opposed to the Board of Selectmen?
Oh, I think we'd feel fine.
Okay, great.
We didn't want to
Excellent.
send it to both bodies.
Good move,
Okay.
yes, I feel.
So we chose the selectmen as being more immediately involved
Okay.
with that. If you would like to take this on, we'd be delighted. Your language shouldn't include the word back, because you never had it to begin with.
Yes. Refer to, yes, good point, thank you.
So, but it would, but as far as, you know, if you want to recommend a moratorium, that's grand. Warrant committee may not agree with you.
Fair enough.
Before Bill says what he wants to say, I just want to reiterate, my position, I don't like moratoriums, and I'm very sympathetic to the situation with the several projects that we've mentioned. However, I'm very troubled by this sort of, the position the selectmen are put in to have to make a decision based on signage without any guidance at all. And these are very, all three projects that you mentioned are very visible projects that are going to have signs for a very long time. And I personally believe that it's worth having those projects wait a few extra months in order to make a good decision here. And I think it sets us up for a lot better proactive zoning in the future as opposed to sort of evaluating these things on a one-off basis with no parameters upon which they're supposed to make their decision.
Well, your guidelines have plenty of parameters, don't they?
But they don't always listen to
Or,
them.
yes,
Our teeth, yeah.
yes, they have a lot more parameters than the bylaws do, yes.
I think Bill had something to say, and then I've got something to add, so,
I think I have a clarification
But they're just
point.
guidelines.
yeah.
They have no teeth.
Right, but they're guidelines, and they do offer guidance.
Correct.
I think the point of the selectmen approve things that the sign review committee does not go with. I think that's happened once, right? That's just the Sleepies.
I think
And
it's the
there's
Sleepies.
only,
It
there's
was
only
for
that.
Sleepy's and Kennedy's both at the same time.
Right, but it's the same building.
Same.
Well, I mean, the
same sign.
initial
Same-
sign and then
It's the
the
same
addition of
issue
the
for
addition.
that same sign.
Correct.
So twice they decided
Well,
not
no, I
to take
think
that
we
advice.
were, we,
Well, I think the
against their
second time
initial
they said it was
proposals for what
grandfathered.
they were asking for on the side of the building, was that not also shot down?
But it never came back to the board to move it to the roof. That it was
Talking
on
about
the wall.
I'm talking about the gable sign.
The gable sign, the sign was designed,
No, the second sign.
So let's put it this way, on
second
what,
lit sign.
on the most offensive sign that we've seen, or people seem to find most offensive, they decided not to take the sign committee's recommendations.
Correct.
but that's the
I think
only
that says a
one.
lot.
Yeah. So I will also say, and I think this goes to Ted's point as well, if we approve this tonight with a moratorium, you know, I am also resistant to the idea of a moratorium for various different reasons, which I won't extend by talking about now, but I think town meeting may strike the moratorium down, that's always possible. The Board of Selectmen may, probably watching this at home, I'm sure, come back and say, look, we understand the issue, we don't want a moratorium for whatever reason, but we understand, we're willing to work with you to not do this without putting a formal moratorium on. We still have time before town meeting to work some of this out, but I do think we should move to a vote tonight,
Yes.
because we have to get back to the warrant committee for next week and be prepped for town meeting, so,
Half of something's better than nothing.
right.
Okay, so what is the motion?
To recommend that the town refer the issue of illuminated signs to the planning board for further study. The planning board will appoint a committee including members of the sign review committee and a citizen representative, and in the meantime, to approve a moratorium on lit signs through October 31st. On backlit signs. What are you doing?
This moratorium shall
Oh,
not affect-
thank you. This moratorium shall not in any way affect municipal signs and shall terminate on October 31st, 2015.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
What a good
Well done,
motion. Okay, any
Lit or
further
just lit?
discussion?
Backlit or lit?
Do we have a second on that particular motion? That's a second? Okay. Discussion? No further discussion? All in favor?
One final point.
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor this, but
Right.
might understand that if we include the language on the moratorium, that the warrant committee is going to oppose it, and that could,
Right, the
in
whole,
fact-
They
the
may
whole
oppose
thing
it.
goes
They may
down in
oppose it.
flames if you.
They
if you-
currently oppose
If
it.
you throw it on there.
Well, no, not necessarily. We can always
You
change
can
that
always
recommendation.
excise it, that's
Yes.
right.
The
Yeah.
planning board is welcome to come talk to the warrant committee on Wednesday, the 29th,
This-
and we'll take
This
that
would
up.
this would be great. We will send a representative.
There may be information you have that we didn't have at the time that might sway some members' opinions.
And
Thank you.
it's worth having the conversation.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Now, we were going to go on to the condominium bylaw, and there is a proposed amendment to the condominium bylaw having to do with a piece of property near my house, and the amendment could affect the value of my property. So I am not going to participate in this particular discussion.
All right, so I want to catch everybody up to where we are with this article on the Article 48, the condominium planned unit development. At the moment, there is an article on the warrant in front of town meeting. Planning board will have to take a vote tonight in order to get our recommendation to the warrant committee in time for town meeting on the article that's in front of town meeting. So we will be doing that tonight, and we'll call Alex back in for that because he does not have a conflict on the article that's in front of town meeting. Now, there has been discussions in front of the planning board about a possible amendment or amendments that may be offered at town meeting. So what the process would be at town meeting, for those who aren't familiar with it, is the article would come up, the warrant committee would give their recommendation, because there's not a recommendation in the warrant, and then the discussion at town meeting would begin. At that point, somebody or some bodies may come forward to offer one or more amendments. We have had several different, we've had two different possible amendments come forward. We've had comments on all of those come forward. Is this not working? Oh, it's just somebody who stopped it. We've had comments on all of those come forward. At our last meeting, there was a proponent of one amendment. Marion McKettrick is representing that proponent, who came forward. There was a group of neighbors who came forward with a possible amendment. And then there were several other neighbors who wished to speak in favor or against of either the original article or the amendment. So I'm going to ask Mrs. McMaster to come forward to present what's going on. As I understand, there were going to be several meetings between our last meeting and this meeting. So I'd like to hear from her first, and then I'd like to hear from one or more neighborhood groups that may be discussing this, and we will hear from everybody possible on this article, as we do have to come up with the recommendation on the original article tonight. The planning board does not have to vote on any amendment tonight. We recognize that there may still be other conversations between now and town meeting. So we will not be voting on the amendment tonight, but we are eager to hear what progress has been made. So, Marion.
So actually, what I would like to do is to defer to the neighbors who may wish to speak, because I have not been at the meetings, but there
Okay.
have been meetings and discussions. So I don't actually have any information myself, but I'm eagerly interested in hearing what the discussion
Well, I
has
wanted to
been
bring
about.
you first because
Thank you,
yours
Marion.
was the original amendment.
Yes,
So,
thank
yes.
Could you clarify for us whether we're in an open hearing right now, or if this is just a discussion?
This is a public hearing on the article, which is not yet
on the original
on
article.
the original article.
So we're not having a hearing on any further articles.
It's only so we're hearing
there's
this
no-
article with the understanding that
There
there
could
may
be an amendment.
there could be an amendment at town meeting. The complexity of the amendments that we have seen so far are such that it is a good idea for us to have the discussion in this public process of the hearing on the original article, so that any town meeting members who may, and any other citizens who may be watching, are aware that this comes forward or may come forward. But that's the other reason we're not taking a vote tonight, is it has not been a formal proposal.
Correct.
So this is just an opportunity for members of the public, interested residents, interested proponents to talk about these amendments that we have heard may be a possibility. So, neighbors, yes, please identify yourself and where you live.
Hello, good evening. Paul Krasinski, living at 5 Stonehill Lane in Milton, and representing myself as well as the Hillside Neighborhood Association this evening under a formal vote that was taken on Tuesday evening as well at the Hillside Neighborhood Association meeting. So thank you for the continuance from 2 weeks ago. I think certainly it was proving productive and valuable, and certainly I personally have learned a tremendous amount, although, and have a tremendous amount of respect for all of the real estate experts and otherwise. And clearly this is a complex issue with many moving parts. And over the last 3 years, we've kind of moved at a glacial speed on this as we considered all of the options. I think really over the last 2 weeks, I think I would applaud both parties, Mr. Hamilton as well as the neighbors, for really becoming engaged, creative, innovative, and kind of looking at designing a solution. So the time afforded countless calls, in-person meetings with Mr. Hamilton, 2 H&A meetings, a financial model to be drawn up, a 12-lot plan, and a potential resolution to be explored through, and as well informal discussions with potential builders. first, before I kind of recount and articulate kind of where we are, the timeline, and kind of the recommendation, I think I would like to say, Mr. Hamilton certainly dispelled a lot of perceptions or misperceptions in kind of the neighborhood and really proved to be an innovative, creative, and person who was willing to negotiate and was open to new ideas. So I think that was really important for us. Second is, the neighborhood really rallied around this understanding that it's a critical issue not only for the neighborhood, but as the town at large as we consider, this bylaw. So together, Mr. Hamilton and I talked about drafting an agreement together, a document that would highlight, the potential for a 12-lot plan that could enable the owner, the developer, and the neighborhood to win. And I think, Marion made that kind of clear distinction in our last meeting around owner and developer, and I think that will be important as we kind of discuss this further. And really, it would enable all three parties to win, both from a financial perspective. As we talked about, this was a business transaction, one that would increase and maximize profit, but also minimize the impact on the neighborhood. So truly mutually beneficial for all parties. This plan enabled 12 lots, single-family homes, neighborhood support for a site-specific zoning variant or rezoning or variance, and empower a builder or homeowner to buy these lots and deliver against the plan, thus averting a 40B and potential for high density, including 45 condos. And we had on Tuesday evening a near unanimous vote with 2 dissenters from the neighborhood that for the support of this plan, which, I would sit there and again applaud both parties. And I think we were both willing, Mr. Hamilton and myself, representing the neighborhood, to sign a document that would memorialize this collective support, and it would have been an incredible outcome for all of us. However, there was one stipulation that was incredibly important to the developer, which was the support for the condo bylaw and the 45 condo units. Mr. Hamilton thought that this would buy us time as we continued to organize toward the 12-lot plan, and it would also enable us to buy time with the owner who, in his own right and fair to feel this way, has been through a very long process where, waiting on the sidelines for 12 months while 40B is, held back to look at creative options, and now he's ready to monetize and capitalize on this property to generate, generational wealth for his family, which we can't blame him. However, while we figured out the process, I kind of probed a bit further, and it seems like, this is where the distinction between owner and developer really came to bear for all of us, which was, Mr. Hamilton acting in a cooperative fashion, in a collaborative fashion, working with the neighborhood, going through. It became clear to me that really there is performance that is required, and there is a continued pressure on Mr. Hamilton to file the application for 40B. And if the condo bylaw was denied, and really the main driver for that is through these discussions, as I understood, was really the owner does not have any interest in sitting out for another 12 months while we figure this out. And so as we continue to discuss it further, we were saying, hey, is it possible to create a recommendation where we have the 12 lots in the plan that we all agreed to, and enable potential constraint of saying, hey, you won't have to sit out the 12 months. Because if truly this bylaw was about Mr. Hamilton not intending to truly build those 45 condominiums, but rather buy us time, and it wasn't the intention to, build on that lot, rather to have a roadway and a bridge to some form of development there, wouldn't it be better just to try to continue to figure this out? So therefore, this deal ultimately hinged on the bylaw. And it was really important not just for the neighborhood, and as we discussed it as a neighborhood on Tuesday night, it became clear that, this was bigger than the neighborhood. This project and initiative was then bigger than the neighborhood, and we just could not support the bylaw for 45 units. And ultimately, we felt like it was out of our hands as a neighborhood, but rather it was really back to, the town to determine, what this precedent is setting. And it was really more important than, buying time ultimately for an owner who is eager to ultimately sell and capitalize. So as I understood it, where we left things was that, with the timing, should you vote tonight to either reject or deny, the thought process would be that the pressure will be there from the owner to apply and file that application for 40B. And then and that would be in May. The goal, though, would be to say, hey, how do we continue the very, very productive and creative conversations that we've had that almost led to me being able to present a document this evening with both signatures from myself or an H&A member and Mr. Hamilton back to you. So ultimately, it came down to timing. It came down to really one criteria, which, let's recall, if this is about buying time and there was not an intention to build on the land, and Mr. Hamilton highlighted that he has been successful in his other projects, and he's looking at retirement and he doesn't want to build there. He would much rather look at that property with a bridge, a roadway, and utilities, and really be done with that project at that point. It was unfortunate. So I think, honestly, if we had the opportunity and a little more time, I think we would be able to look at this creative option, which again was, 12 up to 12 lots, single-family homes, support for rezoning and or variance as you guys decided, and go through the process. Obviously, we understood that there were constraints or things that we needed to move through, which was, does the land perk for 12 lots? Planning, zoning, conservation commission, and the desire to not wait and sit out for an additional 12 months. But wouldn't it be sad and tragic if we had the ability to figure this out without a high density, high volume, and come to a creative resolution? So our goal is, regardless of what happens with the owner and the developer, we decided that we will not support the 45-unit condo. We do support the plan that we outlined, and we really hope that regardless of what is filed, and I understand that the 40B filing, the application can be filed with the state, but cannot be filed with the town until March. That gives us a lot of time. So as we talk about buying time, it seems like a artificial, obviously it's on the warrant, it's, has to be a binary vote, but I feel like we're so close. So ultimately, I think this came down to an insurance policy on both sides. I think both sides acted in good faith, tried to figure out the solution. I think we were very close. This was the issue, and obviously there's a vote tonight that has to happen for May, which I think has ripple effects to moving us toward 40B, although the neighborhood felt as though the 45 unit condo bylaw really was out of our hands at that point. It was less about neighborhood, and it was more about kind of the town of Milton and what the precedent is that sets. So ultimately, we felt as though, we can look at the 12-lot plan, and felt as though we didn't have insurance to say, hey, well, if we go along with the 45 condo bylaw, then what insurance do we have that we're going to go down that 12-lot plan? And his argument was, well, what's the insurance that I have that if we go down this 12-lot plan and it can't get perked or something happens through that process, someone appeals, someone gets denied or rejected, what's my fallback? I have to wait another 12 months. So ultimately, an incredibly productive process, and again, I can't reiterate both to the neighbors and to Mr. Hamilton. I think it was a very spirited, engaging, non-emotional. We kind of set the standards and the rules of this is a business transaction. This is what we're looking to accomplish here. So ultimately, I think, both, and I think this is really important, both Mr. Hamilton and the neighborhood agreed to 12 lots, site-specific rezoning for 12 lots, single-family homes, the potential of no 40B or condos by future owners as part of that agreement. However, the bylaw was that sticking point, and we just could not support that bylaw. So Therefore, and I know you asked for the timeline last time, but, if denied or rejected, I believe the next step is, filing for 40B with Massachusetts, understanding that 40B can't be until March with the town. And our goal would be to say, I hope that we can still come to a creative agreement on 12 lots. We understand that the risk of 40B will be filed. However, the ability to continue a resolution where we both avoid the cost, the time, the expense, and the frustration that we've all seen. And again, the glacier pace is interesting because I think the glacier receded. I think both highlighted the benefit and saw the benefit and come to an agreement. So really, I think if we look at this from an objective standpoint, the time should not be the limiting factor here on a binary vote. And really 45 condos or 40B, clearly in a 40B case, you're looking and you're willing to wait, if you're Mr. Fandry, the owner, for potentially 3 or 4 years to see that actually come to bear. Here, we're looking at 12 houses, and we should be able to wait until October. So it's definitely an important decision for all of us, not just the neighbors. Mr. Hamilton highlighted that. And it does, though, set precedent more broadly for the town of Milton, which really is above kind of this, quote, project. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. Members, any questions for him?
What was the acreage? What's the total acreage?
Total acreage is 15 acres total on the property.
Thank you.
Question for you. You referenced October at the end there. So, is your intention to hopefully be back in front of the town with an article for August that would be on the October warrant?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what is the resolution here. I think there's no question that the options are now more limited. But I think the neighborhood kind of came to consensus or general consensus with 1 or 2 dissenters, highlighting that we would like to continue to figure out that resolution, even if 40B is filed in an application to the state of Massachusetts.
If they go to 12-lot subdivision, in fact, they wouldn't need to have an article relative to that site.
They probably would.
I think they do because of wetlands, and it's not 15 contiguous lots, right? That's including the A&R lot.
Yeah, so the A&R lot.
And it's one.
Is it double A?
It's double A, so it's 2 acre lots.
Right.
You're contiguous, the only thing you're missing is the double A.
Right. So you need a variance or some modification
Right.
of the bylaw to be able to build
They need an
at
article
that
for
density.
12 lots up there where they need a variance.
Need a variance
Yeah,
for the
so it'd be a
density.
variance. So they wouldn't have to write up an article to
They're
do
just,
that.
I see.
You could go either way. I mean, you could put in new language that would allow you to.
Right, but they wouldn't need to. They could just go to
Right,
variance.
or you could go for the variance.
Which, if all the neighbors were in favor, I think would
Yes.
be a process
Yes, if
that
all
would
the neighbors are in
probably
favor, that is the way to go.
positive.
Yeah, I think it would be a very positive process. And in reality, again, it's unfortunate that, the timing of this vote and town meeting is driving the decision, which just doesn't seem, that way.
Just a comment, when you talked about perking, and I had a little discussion with Bill, I mean, apparently they're thinking of septic on site for houses, fine. And that could be a problem, but, unless I'm confused, whether you go 40B or you put in 45 townhouses, there could be a problem with any of those processes.
This is true, and
So for him to say that, it doesn't perk and then I get stuck, well, you could try 45 condo units, you might get stuck. You could try 40B and you might get stuck.
right. Yeah, and I think that was the realism of, the constraints on both sides. And I think we were willing to work through those constraints together. And ultimately, the A&R lot, just so you are aware, it would be required inside of this project. There was a pending legal action on that A&R lot. However, in conversations with the neighbors, it was something where they felt comfortable, inclusive of Mr. Corliss, who had filed that action, to say, yes, we understand that we're going for the greater good here. But again, if we talk about timing, we talk about insurance. Insurance is, 45 condos was Mr. Hamilton's insurance. Mr. Corliss's insurance was the, litigation and the appeal. And really ours was, hey, if we go along with this, bylaw, we're not really sure, because we don't have it and we don't see the contractual paperwork to say that, that will say, hey, we tried our hardest, it didn't perk for 12, and therefore we have to go to 45. It just didn't make sense for us.
All right, Paul, thank you very much.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to hear from anybody else who wishes to speak on this. Yes?
Good evening, Tim Kernan. I'm on the Townhouse Condominium Bylaw Subcommittee and also president of the Brush Hill Area Neighborhood Association. Just to digress for 1 second, earlier you were talking about reviewing possible articles for the zoning articles for the October town meeting. Previously, I think a number of people have commented that summer is just a horrible time to do that. I realize there's not much you can do about it, but I did want to raise that as a comment. There has been expressed the feeling that the Townhouse Condominium Bylaw Subcommittee, which was created this past fall, is disorganized and not making progress. I have a very different opinion. The committee was formed for the purpose of making determination as to whether it is possible, and perhaps advisable, to write a townwide bylaw which provides the development of townhouse condominiums. The effort springs from the pressure which arises from 40B as developers pursue their interests in building out property, yet find that their options, as provided under the town zoning bylaw, do not match their needs. In such cases, developers, in one hand, hang the threat of 40B over the neighborhood, and in the other hand, propose plans which require special zoning. Neighborhoods understandably crumble under the threat of special zoning when special zoning is created. We saw this at St. Pius, and now we, at least last week, saw it at Hillside and see little pieces of it still remaining at Hillside, although I'm glad to hear there's some cooperation. The prevailing feeling was that this special permit approach to zoning is not good for the neighbors because they are forced to react and cannot enjoy the benefits of real planning. Not good for developers because he is exposed to long delays given the need to prepare and present new zoning articles to town meeting, in addition to being exposed to the risk that the zoning would fail town meeting. And not good for the town as a whole, as it deprives the town of its right to control its zoning as a meaningful way and deters otherwise good development opportunities. So then, the subcommittee was formed to see if it's possible to write a townwide condominium bylaw so that developers could apply for such permitting without going through the long delay and risky town meeting process. At one of our early meetings, each member presented a list of ideas, concerns, or thoughts about the task at hand. I think it's instructive to mention a few of these because as our meetings continued, many of these items resurfaced, illustrating their importance. How do we preserve open space where it's available? What's the proper density in the various sections of town? How do we preserve the unique characteristics of each site? Will town meeting accept? How will the neighborhood associations get involved? How do we preserve historic and scenic roads? How do we maintain the neighborhood character? How do we avoid knee-jerk reactions, such as we've been seeing in the past relative to these developments? A broad-based bylaw may be complex, and we should we take a phased approach? How do we preserve topology and natural features? Some would argue that there are two circumstances which drew the committee off course. First was the consideration of a draft version of a townwide bylaw written by a member, which in part originated from the St. Pius zoning passed last fall. The second was a request by the planning board to provide them with feedback relative to a citizen's article submitted for consideration at this coming town meeting. That's the one we're talking about tonight. Distraction is a measure relative to one's objective. If the committee's objective is to determine whether or not such a townwide bylaw can be created, then it seems to me that the committee needs to formulate a set of guidelines or standards to be used as a basis upon which to make their assessment as to the end. And in the end, can the question be asked and answered relative to these standards? As illustrated above, it is not an easy process, and there's a lot to consider. I maintain that the committee is right on target. There is no distraction. What better way is there to flesh out the standards than to use live cases? These two distractions are indeed the nucleus upon which the committee has engaged in a rich discussion from which drops the very standards which are needed to make their decisions. It is my opinion, and indeed one shared by many members of the committee, not only that it is impossible to craft such a single bylaw for the development of condominiums on a townwide basis, but that it is insofar as the neighbor areas which we have discussed relative to this article, i.e. Hillside, Upper Canton Ave, and the former Muse area, among others, is a bylaw which these neighborhood areas are dramatically opposed to. To propose to inject a series of developments which is foreign to the existing construct of a neighborhood is contradictory to the fabric of that neighborhood and runs against the existing zoning and should not be pursued. So I just wanted to reiterate that I think that for this committee to pursue a townwide bylaw committee at this time, I don't think the neighbors are for it. I've heard from a number of different neighborhood associations, they don't want it. I think it was very helpful to have the discussion that we've had with the committee, and through this board here, people begin to hear the issues and see what they are. I just don't think people want to see it, so I would urge you to move forward without such a townwide bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak on this? All right. Oh, come forward.
Good evening. Scott Johnson, 11 Hillside Street. I want to address, first of all, the previous statement by the Hillside Neighborhood Association and verify that we were very clear last night that it was not definitely a 12-unit subdivision, but up to 12 units, because we can't be positive about how the area will perk. So we don't want to be backed into a situation where if we can't do 12, the deal falls through if we're able to strike a deal of that nature.
Excuse me, for the benefit of the viewers at home, could you explain what perk means?
That means that they can put the sewage system in that can accommodate that many houses. And there is a substantial amount of wetland at that property, I believe.
Just some thoughts on that. If they were to put in 45 townhouses, my understanding that they would tie into public sewage. If they put in 12 homes, they don't want to tie it. From what I've heard in the discussion that's gone on, the developer and the owner are certainly trying to, for lack of better words, maximize profit. So if they found that the 12-house development was a receptive vehicle for them to make profit, then I can't believe that they're making significantly less profit than they would on 45 townhouses. In which case, I don't understand why they wouldn't tie those houses into the public sewage.
I don't think
in which case, I don't think that the percolation of the soil in the area would be that significant.
You know, you bring up the idea of profitability, and I don't think that the people of the neighborhood in any way want to deny the profitability to the developer. I mean, we're very aware that if you give any person with a not in my backyard attitude the same opportunity that the developer has, and those people have paid taxes on the land for a long time, I think all of us are probably, for the most part, especially if we needed the money, we're going to try to maximize profit. So we looked at this from the perspective of, as a neighborhood in the meeting, from a perspective of how could we get the profit to the developer. We're not looking to do that, and we're trying to look at a way to make a shorter cut for them to be able to develop and get their profit, which means less expense for them. And it means a better, more conforming development plan that fits in with the neighborhood as a whole. That being said, the condos leave the entire town open to, I think, a very dangerous precedent. It's obvious that people are trying to develop every stitch of land around this town, which affects the whole character of the town. And what I want to specifically address is this rumor that's been perpetuated that condos will not put the stress on the school system that they say they will. And to anybody that's thinking they're going to get a tax windfall from two-bedroom condos, I think there's no evidence at all to support that whatsoever. I'm a landlord in the town, and I rent two-bedroom apartments, and by far, the vast majority of the people that apply for them are people with children, trying to get into the town, looking for a less expensive way than buying, and trying to get into the school system with their children. Sometimes I see 3 and 4 children, even up to 5 children in a 2-bedroom apartment, that people are trying to get into the town to get their children educated. I don't blame them for that, but this puts a burden on the school system in which we're getting less tax revenue. And that's the pragmatic reality of the situation that some of these pie-in-the-sky thinkers think. So I am, just from a pragmatic perspective, adamantly opposed to a condominium bylaw in the town. One, it'll change our way of life, it'll change the atmosphere and the bucolic beauty of the town. And 3, it's going to increase our tax burden as opposed to increase our tax revenue. Any questions?
Any questions, guys?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak to this?
Denny Swinson, Green Street. I just was wondering if I could, there was a lot to digest, a big update on the Hillside neighborhood. Does the Hillside neighborhood want even the article
Denny, you need to
version,
speak into
the
the mic,
article
yeah.
version that had 22 condo units, or is the Hillside neighborhood no longer wants the article?
We do not want the article. We voted almost unanimously against the article.
I know at the beginning of the meeting you said that you didn't want to, you wanted to vote on the initial article, but not get into all the new versions.
Because there's no formal amendment for us to vote on at this point, yes. So it
Good,
would be the
good.
initial article.
Okay.
Do you wish to speak to the initial article?
Yes.
Okay, there's a reason I want to ask that. So
Yeah.
Alex can vote on the initial article. So if we're going to be moving away from the discussion of the amendments, I want to bring Alex back in so that he can be part of any discussions on the original article. But that means before we get there, if you don't mind holding on for a second,
Well-
does anybody else want to talk to the amendments?
I want
Okay, all right, so then let's split.
Does anyone? Okay.
Okay.
So I was thinking that just for the sake of all the neighborhoods, it's important to let us know tonight, if possible, if all those other versions are off the table as well. In other words, I just think it's important for all of us to sort of know what we're walking into at town meeting, because, leaving us all to wonder, what, if any, version will end up on the floor of town meeting, is just not respectful to the citizens, and that, our communities need a chance to understand, evaluate, and respond to each potential version. So, putting any version forward, especially after this point, any new version in the 11th hour, deprives all of us of a meaningful opportunity to do that. So that's my request.
So I think that's a very valid request.
Thank you.
So we are not bringing in an alternative version, so we know that. So then the next question is, Paul from the Hillside, you guys are not bringing any alternative versions in?
We are not.
Marion, you're the one who had brought up an original potential amendment. Do you want to come forward and speak now? Is this an appropriate moment for you? Great.
Well, it's obvious from Paul Krasinski's comments that a lot of work has been going on in the neighborhood, and a lot of interesting progress has been made. And he's a great speaker, and he really clearly explained where there are still differences and where there is a desire to still explore, specifically that 12-unit development. And this is pertinent to the amendment. I did want to clarify a couple of things. It's my understanding that if there were the amendment that I have proposed would be for a condominium development that would use on-site sewage treatment. It would not connect. The sewer is at the beginning of Hillside Street, so it's a long connection. If there were to be a 40B development up on that site, the concept that's been discussed is about 76 units, then public sewer would have to be brought into the site, and that is a very substantial expense, extremely substantial. So if there were to be a 12-unit single-family development, then presumably if if the engineering work that's been done thus far has indicated that you could do on-site commingled treatment for sewage for 45 units, that you could probably find a way to do sewage treatment for 12. So I'm not saying that it isn't going to turn out to be a problem, but I don't see that as the primary issue. I also see, and I haven't discussed this with, the neighborhood group or anything, but now that I hear what the proposal is, I believe, well, there would be, one way you could do such a proposal is to take the cluster zoning bylaw, single family, go to the Board of Appeals and ask for a variance for anything that you need a variance for. You would need a variance to do 12 units because with all the conditions and restrictions in that bylaw, you wouldn't reach 12 units.
Right.
So that would be one vehicle. And as you pointed out, if the neighborhood were strongly supportive of such an option, then it's possible that a Board of Appeals would consider it and would view it positively. So now to go back to the amendments. I mean, Paul Krasinski's kind of laid it all out for you. From the developer and the owner's standpoint, they wanted to keep this amendment alive because they thought it was they'd like to have it as an option in lieu of a 40B proposal, which would be the next step if this other development can't be worked out. But the neighborhood is, they've considered it, they've discussed it, they've taken a vote. So we've heard from the Neighborhood Association that they're not going to support any condominium amendment that would apply to this site. So that's the answer from the neighborhood. I've only had one conversation that was late this afternoon with the developer who's spoken to the owner. So, the position that they gave me was we still think there ought to be that option on the table. We think it's better to consider a 45-unit condominium development than a 75-unit 40B proposal. These are just conceptual ideas. So I deliver that information to the planning board. I think, nevertheless, I understand that it's quite difficult for a planning board to support an amendment when you don't have neighborhood support for it. So that's why it's before you. The particular amendment that I gave you, there could have been some changes made to that, but the density issue is a key issue in terms of what value it represents for the property. As an alternative to another more dense type of affordable housing development. And that's why it's been proposed at that density. That's for the planning board to discuss and think about. If you're not ready to do anything tonight, that's one thing. If you're sure you're ready, then everybody probably needs to know. If you're not going to support an amendment, if it is proposed.
I just want to clarify, you are definitely going to propose that amendment on behalf of your client.
I'm telling you that as of tonight, my
Okay.
client is saying to me, we think it's a good idea to keep that amendment on the table, but they would like to have the support of the planning board. And I recognize the difficulty that you're faced with in that regard. Because, an amendment without the support of the planning board is problematic. We're available to discuss this with the warrant committee. We have been invited to come and discuss it with the warrant committee next week, but we'll see what happens tonight. I want to say, nevertheless, I think a great deal of progress has been made. I think there is an option on the table being discussed. I think a lot of good will and good effort has gone into that, and so I just want to thank everybody thank you for listening to these ideas, and thank you to the neighborhood for working on them with the developer and the owner.
Thank you very much. So, gentlemen, we have two options before we bring Alex back in to talk to the main one. We could, if we wanted to, take a position on the amendment tonight. We've heard that there would be just one amendment that might be brought forward, and that's the one that we've already seen. We could also hold off and wait for the amendment to be brought to the floor of town meeting and see town meeting's reaction before taking a formal position. We've certainly had the ability to review and understand the implications of the amendment. We may or may not wish to hear town meeting's comments on it before we take a formal position. And certainly in the past, we've had precedent where we don't take a position we don't usually know there's going to be an amendment until we get to the floor of town meeting. So, or we could discuss it through tonight and come to a vote on it, recognizing that we still need to bring Alex in for a vote on the main article. So what's your pleasure?
First of all, I don't support the article that's in the warrant,
Right.
in which case I don't support an amendment to an article I don't support. Beyond that, even if I supported the article, I think the amendment that was offered is, again, I tried to state it last time, to me, and by definition, the word amendment, it's more than just an amendment, it's almost a rewrite. And like one of the citizens stated tonight, I think it would be unfair to town meeting members to give them such a significant rewrite to digest instantaneously at town meeting and vote on. So no, I'm like I say, opposed to the article and the amendment.
Brian, any thoughts?
From the standpoint that, whether it's fair to give the town meeting such a significant change on the town meeting floor, I'm not sure that that's our purview. It sounds like this amendment might be made.
If the
it's
moderator
accepted by
accepts
the
it,
moderator.
then yes.
So, to that extent, I am, I do think that this board should probably take a position on it one way or the other. Clearly, Mr. Kelly has done so. I have my thoughts on it. I actually am not convinced I'm prepared to take a final position on it tonight without a discussion amidst the board of each point. So whether we want to take the time at 8:30 to do that tonight, I'm not sure. So I'm not in a position to make a motion. I'm interested in hearing others' thoughts.
Okay. Ed, do you have any?
I'm going to abstain, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
So I am, I recognize that although there's a possibility that the town moderator may declare it within the scope of the article, it is a significant change to the article. It is more restrictive than the original article, but it is a change. I also, and the town moderator may change his mind. He's not making the ruling to the floor of town meeting. He doesn't make the ruling to the floor of town meeting. So I don't feel, we recognize that there's only one amendment coming forward. That amendment has already been given to us. It is a public document. I'm assuming it will be given to town meeting members the first night of town meeting. I don't think it's necessarily appropriate that we take a vote on it tonight. I agree we need further discussion. I would also not want to anticipate the moderator's ruling by taking a vote on it tonight. So,
Hearing your comments.
But, and I just want to clarify.
Certainly.
yeah, and this is on the amendment, not the original
The
article.
amendment, speaking
Yes.
on the amendment.
Yes.
I understand what you said, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you said. It's not our purview to say whether it can be brought to town meeting or not. It was just of my opinion.
Yes.
I understand.
That I couldn't support.
I understand that.
Yeah.
If there's going to be a vote taken by the planning board,
We know that in advance.
and I understand what you're saying about discussion, but
Yeah.
I've heard quite a bit of discussion.
I understand.
In tonight's meeting, in the previous meeting.
It was
it's helped me
discussion among,
formulate this
yes.
opinion. It's not an
Yeah.
instantaneous.
So, to what you just said, Emily, I to the extent that there's not a formal amendment proposed at this point, to the extent that we want to use this time to work with something that is before this board officially on other matters, and to the point that I think it would be interesting to hear town meetings comments. I guess I'm not actually. I think I would defer at this point to making a ruling. I would like to hear more information.
So I think what we should do is we should put this on our agenda for May 4th.
Yes.
That we would discuss whatever amendment is formally presented to town meeting
If
at that
any.
point. Hang on. Yes, Ted.
Hi.
Come on up.
Welcome back.
Always nice to hear from the warrant committee.
Sorry.
No, please no.
Questions for you.
Yes, fire away.
What time is your meeting before the
6:30.
6:30.
My understanding is that the moderator believes this draft recommendation would be within the scope.
Yes.
That's our understanding.
But he has also said, my understanding, he's also said that he will not make the formal ruling until it's actually at town meeting.
Uh-huh.
So that's why I don't want to jump the gun if possible.
What we
That's
were
part
told
one.
as a member of the condo committee, town council has ruled it is within scope. Town moderator has said he agrees, but will not rule until town meeting.
So that's what we understand so far.
Because, of course, the warrant committee has to make a recommendation
We,
for town meeting
we will be
on this
giving-
article.
Okay, we're giving you a recommendation tonight. We will vote on the article, the
Yes.
actual article in the warrant tonight.
Yes.
But we have to bring Alex back in to do that.
And that's grand.
Yes.
However, the warrant committee is in possession of the initial draft recommendation from Ms. McKettrick, and that could, in fact, become the warrant committee recommendation.
Well, that would be interesting, because if it becomes a warrant committee recommendation, we will need to have a vote on that.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Before town meeting. I believe we're meeting with you next week.
That'll be nice.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
No, that's good.
What is the date on that meeting?
It's the 29th.
29th.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes,
Sorry, can we get clarification on 2 points, please?
of course.
So one is.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, no, that would be great. And it's more for us innocent bystanders.
Right.
So the clarification on Marion's comment, which is that you asked, are you for or against the amendment at this point? And she highlighted that as of this evening, my clients are pushing forward with the amendment. What does that mean exactly?
So they would be proposing, my understanding is they would be proposing the amendment on the floor of town meeting, the one that we have seen so far. Is that correct, Marion? So far, there have been no changes? The amendment that you would propose would be the one that we have seen as of this evening?
There may be some small changes
Okay,
to it.
so.
We really haven't been,
Yeah, please come forward. Mics, yes. I just want to make sure that when people leave this room, we all understand what's going to happen.
I have reviewed the amendment in light of the discussion that I have listened to, and I have looked at some possible changes to the amendment that I wrote
Right.
in view of some of those comments. But I have not, my client has not decided whether to tell me to put those, to recommend those, put those amendments in the proposed language, because, first of all, the discussion with the neighborhood is going on. I want to hear from the planning board, and we weren't sure what the disposition of the alternative amendment was going to be. And because the key difference was density,
Right.
and we can't change the density, at least given the reasons why the amendment is being proposed as it has. And yeah, you were also asking me, are we going to propose the amendment at town meeting? Are we going to pursue it with the warrant committee? Well, I have agreed to meet with the warrant committee next week to discuss it.
Right.
But I would urge all parties to continue the discussion of what they would really like to see. That's just my personal view. I think a lot can be accomplished, and a lot has been accomplished. So the reason to ask for the amendment at town meeting and before the warrant committee would be because it's preferable as an alternative. Should this much preferred 12-unit development not work for some reason, it would be a preferred alternative to a denser 40B development. That's the only other option that's on the table. So that's why the developer is saying to me, and the owner is saying, well, we still think, this zoning amendment ought to be available. That's why I'm still talking about it.
Right, but given what you've just said, it is definitely premature for us to take a vote tonight,
Yes.
because there may be changes
I
between
agree.
now and
So,
then.
so there's two
yeah.
things about that, right? So let's look at kind of the historical chronology of this process, and I would just urge everyone to be very sensitive to that, because I think there's been fits and starts of either we're looking at this amendment or we're not looking at it. We really don't want to have zero time as a neighborhood, as we've all worked very, very hard. As of today, my commentary with Mr. Hamilton was, hey, we agree to disagree on the 45. We believe that amendment is about buying time, and if it's voted down or denied, immediately a 40B development will be filed as an application with the state. Now, tonight, we're hearing something a little bit different, right? What we're hearing is, again, let's bifurcate the developer-owner conversation. The developer is clearly telling me that the pressure is there with this amendment. The only reason we would have gone with the amendment was to buy time, because the owner wants 40B now. Now I'm hearing Mrs. McKettrick say that, now he may not be interested in pursuing 40B as hard and there is a preferred 12-lot solution. So what I'm trying to get at is, if you look at all the work that's been done, and I'm talking an extremely diligent process with a financial model that looked at the time value of money over the next 3 years, 4 years. If we looked at those 12 lots, we ran comparables in the neighborhood that range from 550,000 to 750,000. Above 550,000, this deal works at 550,000 and above, and for up to 12 houses, this deal works for all parties involved. So I'm unclear, and I just don't want to have a series of events happen between now and otherwise where we're not fully aligned and in lockstep. We've been burned by a 11th hour change, which led to the neighborhood hiring a 40B lawyer, which, by the way, has been completely inactive through the entire process. So there's been no activity with Witten, who was hired as a 40B. It was stated, hey, we're looking at, if this doesn't happen, we'll file 40B. The normal reaction of any human being would be to say, I better protect myself as a layperson. So I just don't want to get surprised. I think we've all gone way too far in this process. We've spent a lot of time. I think Mr. Hamilton, again, has proven and dispelled the myths of him being the villain. But I think now, owner and developer are saying different things represented by one person, and I just want clarity. I think we owe it to the neighborhood to be clear. We owe it to the neighborhood to play the process directly by the line so that we all have time and there's no, back channel additions that we don't see, that we can't caucus on, that we can't consider prior to. And if that's the case, we should move to take the amendment off the table and push it to an October where really the zoning conversations happen in that town meeting as a zoning meeting versus there's no pressure, there was no pressure to put it into this May one until it was put on the warrant, and it was pushed up to be in May versus October. So I think between now and October, there's a lot of good things that can happen.
So then the best.
This board agrees with that,
Yeah.
I think, but we have to respond to, I don't think this board's going to make any moves. So when you talk about being aligned, we will have to respond to whatever is submitted by the developer's amendment, is submitted by the neighborhood's amendment, or if nothing is submitted, then we'll be taking a vote tonight on the existing article.
Well, we're taking a vote tonight on the existing article no matter what.
Either
because
way, either way. That's
we have to have a recommendation for
So-
town meeting, but just because, so.
We can't control whether a
Yes.
final hour change happens, is what I'm trying to say to you, from the standpoint that an amendment can be made on the floor of town meeting, and we'll all be responding to a final change.
Yeah, and just to remember, just to clarify the process, so the warrant committee will get up, they will make the recommendation, whatever that article is, whatever that recommendation is to the article. We will have our recommendation in hand for the original one, and anybody at any point in the discussion can bring forward an amendment. So what the best clarity I have now from what I'm hearing is there may be an amendment based loosely on the draft that or based very specifically, but based on the draft that we have already. But that draft may change between now and then. That amendment may or may not happen between now and then. And so there's no vote we can take on the amendment tonight, except to be aware that there are continuing conversations about that. So what we can do.
Bring out.
It's just general discussion, but I can't help but be almost like as a citizen here, be curious. You're saying that the condo development will be a good option.
What I'm saying.
And maybe I'm not worried, it would be an option.
It could be an option.
It could be an option. So with that said, again, I'm trying to separate myself and speak as a citizen. Why in turn wouldn't he still go for the 45B and have another option? I mean, he's going to go for the development of the condos, he's going to pursue the 12 units, and he might as well submit the 45B at the same time. Why
Well, if
wouldn't
that's
you?
the concern, then that should be put on the table. I haven't been sitting in on these discussions. I don't think we're on a different page here. I mean, I've only had a brief conversation this afternoon.
Right.
You've had a lot more, and you've had a lot more conversations with the neighborhood. So I want to make it clear, I don't think there's a difference. If I'm confusing things, it's only because I've done less talking with anybody than you have,
Right.
Paul. And so what.
But you
I mean,
represent.
anybody
but
would
the
be foolish to
representation-
believe that the more options, the better.
So we have,
I think
That's
we,
right.
I think we
It's good to have
all,
options other than 40B. That's all I'm
And
saying.
40B.
right,
so we
but
have a question in the back. Let me
Yep.
just, because I think it, hey, come on up. Introduce yourself.
I was going to keep quiet, but now I'm concerned. I'm Judy George.
Yep.
I'm on 52 Ford Ranch Road. And I was hopeful. Paul has done a outstanding job pulling the whole neighborhood together, not only the abutters. And we have a good feeling that he's made a lot of progress. But now I'm sitting back here, and Marion comes up, and I just heard what she had to say, and I am questioning the viability of what has been said by Paul to the HSN, and then what Marion just said right now. So we would like that taken off. I think we've gone in good faith. I think Paul's done a miraculous job of getting a lot of people to go to the extent that they have. And throwing at us, oh yeah, but we still want the 45, and oh yeah, we still want the 40B to be a consideration, throws cold water on me. And it makes me feel less optimistic. So that's all I have to say. I'm really hopeful that Paul will do the magnificent job he has, and that him and Mr. Hamilton, but when the lawyer comes who represents both the owner and him and sounds different, that makes me nervous.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you will take that back to your client now
I
that
will
you've
take
heard
that back to my
Yes.
client.
So-
I do understand that position.
Okay.
And I guess, trying to think of how best to put this. That's why I said, I think everybody needs to continue to work on this. I
Yeah.
think it's pretty clear that this is a good option.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think we have consensus on
You
that.
have received positive feedback from the owner-developer duo that it's a positive option. That's a good place to be.
Yeah,
From
I
the
think the
perspective-
only,
Right.
the only difference there, though, is, and so I fully agree, and I think we are down a path far. I think what we don't want as a neighborhood is a technicality to change an amendment that hasn't been discussed. Now that all three parties are really working well together, that should be a very informed process. We don't want to come to, the meeting the night of and hear the language has changed, it's shifted, we now have a new amendment, because that really isn't how we've worked this negotiation. That said, I think the developer clearly stated to me as of today, and I think representing both the owner and the developer, it's good to hear you say we're not far off, so that, I guess, leaves hope. But the developer was clear to me that if we did not support the 45 condo unit bylaw, that it would move immediately per that vote to 40B, which in reality, the neighborhood obviously is against any really high density. We think we came up with a good option, one that's financially viable, makes everyone whole, and minimizes the impact on the neighborhood. I think it would be ill-advised to have changes that are not in that same spirit of transparency through the week.
Okay,
Again, I
so
think I
then-
just
hang-
keep in
hang on,
mind,
Mike.
just last comment, it'd be illogical to think that a person wouldn't pursue additional options. So when you say, if you don't support the amendment, he's going to go to 45B, why wouldn't he do it anyway?
Right. No, I think that's the
And I
point.
keep one last point in mind, good cop, bad cop. Keep that in mind.
Okay, so then, we're going to wrap this part up now. I think we've heard from everybody.
Can I just add one?
About the amendment? Yes. Okay, all right. And then we need to wrap this up, because we have a public hearing that has been waiting very patiently for
So the Carberry neighborhood and the Hemingway Woods, otherwise known as Milton Muse neighborhood, want to support the Hillside neighborhood as. And it sounds like they more or less need a variance and whatever we can do. And I think whatever the town can do, maybe a variance or two, that's what the town can do. The article opens up other neighborhoods, and other neighborhoods aren't going to be able to respond. Now, I know you don't have as much control over the process, and I'm trying to understand it myself.
Right.
But what the other neighborhoods don't want to happen is for us to have to come up, when I looked at each of these amendments, I was looking at ways to protect each of these other neighborhoods. So each of these communities need a chance to take it in, understand it, reflect on it, respond to it. We can't necessarily do that on the floor. We just can't. I mean, we have, a lot of us have a lot of resources, but there's a lot at stake here. And these communities really care, and these communities really want to work together, and we want to come up with long-term solutions for all three of our neighborhoods, and the town as well. I mean, the 40B threat has affected a lot of us for a number of years, and we really want to just be careful with this. So I just wanted to support the Hillside neighborhood as best as we could, in that we also don't want to see any more amendments, any more articles on this. We want to give them the time and space and support any variances we can give them to come up with a win-win solution and learn from it and hopefully apply it to our neighborhoods too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So then, yes.
Just final comment. The only reason this is an issue at all is that we've only had a short time to have these discussions. I haven't been sitting in on them, but they've been very productive. But there's no guarantee. In other words, there's still at least one neighbor who didn't agree with this proposal. I think the neighbor's in a butter. So, that's why the developer is still concerned about having another option. And yes, of course, it's for someone who owns land, the more options, the better. Absolutely. But that isn't the only reason. The reason is that you've done an awful lot to get support. You've worked very well, and it looks good to me. It looks like it's moving in the right direction. That's what I can say right now.
Okay.
I do understand what you're saying. You're correct. That's a view that the developer and the owner have at this time, but the planning board's going to have to, decide what to do. Warrant committee's going to have to decide what to do. It's difficult to get zoning amendments through unless there's a lot of support for them. That's the bottom line.
And I think the only assumption that was made through the process was that it was not possible to pursue multiple paths at once, which is what led the thought that if this was denied and or rejected as a condo bylaw, it had to move to 40B, because we would not be able to continue to, and Bob Daler and Webb Collins, Bob Daler being an engineer, Webb Collins being a town meeting member, both said, in any one of these cases, generally speaking, the parties continue to work on a resolution, which is why we supported the fact of saying, hey, we'll go for the 12-lot plan. We'll try to continue to work through, even though we know he may have to file for 40B, work through that process. So I think there needs to be some clarification on the fact that multiple paths can be pursued without interfering and having him sit out for 12 months, which seems to be his only last concern, which is why the bylaw amendment is even on the table, which seems rough to me.
So then let me wrap up where we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Actually, thank you all of those who have spoken. So there is no formal amendment in front of us now, so there's nothing for us to take a position on. We'll wait and see what happens. I think to a number of points that have been made, that if an amendment is proposed, it needs to get out as quickly as possible, but we also want to make sure, at least from the planning board's point of view, that the neighbors and the developer and the owner all have plenty of time to talk, knowing that there's this deadline from town meeting. So we're going to move back to the original article. We're going to bring Alex back in. We'll put this on our agenda for May 4th, Bill and Tim, just in case an article comes forward. But other than that, I think we are moving forward. Thank you all for participating. We look forward to hearing the results of any further discussions on this. And please keep the planning department aware of what's going on so that we're prepared for town meeting. Alex, I'm turning this back over to you for discussion of the article that's in front of town meeting. On the original article.
Well, I think everyone agrees that the original article deserves to be sent back to the planning board or sent to the planning board for study.
Yes.
And that was a motion that actually we had when Ms. McKettrick said, wait, I have an amendment, some time ago.
Some time ago.
So, shall we hear that motion again?
So I move that we recommend to town meeting that the Article 48 be sent to the planning board for study.
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion?
I just think it would be nice if we made clear to the body that, but beyond the fact that it needs to go back to study, we think as it sits right now, it's got a lot of holes. It's going to open the town up to some very negative situations.
And that's why, I mean, it has no minimum lot size, it has no frontage requirement, it has
We don't want
it has a million problems.
Exactly. We
Yes.
don't want to take it back to
Yes.
tweak it.
No,
and
it-
delay
it
things.
needs- yes.
We want to take it back because
Because
it's
it has serious
Swiss
holes,
cheese.
yes.
Well, it's going to be probably given to the condo committee for its consideration, for what it's worth.
I just want to make sure that.
Okay,
people as a whole
does that
understand.
make that clear?
Yeah, I think that makes it clear. I think the other thing that we should just note in our discussion is that this does not preclude us taking a position on any amendment or amendments that come in front of town meeting. But at this point, we are most decidedly recommending that this come to the planning board for study.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we are going to go on to the Thayer Nursery application. And, let's see, this is a continued hearing, continued from
It's our last
the
meeting.
9th. Continued from the 9th. And when we last spoke, we were discussing fences.
Yes.
And since then, we have gotten a letter from
Forgot to do that.
Ms. Tiemens saying that she would like, it's you, come on up. Come on up and,
So much she, it's a we.
okay, well, yeah, it's true.
It's a we.
It's a we.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Thank you.
You can discuss fences, but you can also discuss any other issues you might have.
I think, first of all, to start out is, we're direct abutter. We live next to Phil and John, and we live next to Pam, so we're sandwiched in between. And I think, you know, we've been there for 22 years, so there's been countless discussions of the nursery, the landscape business, and everything that happens over there. I really don't want to make it a we against them thing, because we have to come to solution. We're not leaving, they're not leaving. And I think the planning board, we need to get to a solution that works. It's not putting lipstick on a pig. It is a commercial operation, it's not a residential buffer. There are ramifications with it. And I just think at this point, the discussion has to be in the right direction. Not, you know, I looked at a plan and not to digress, but a year ago, Ned reached out and said, you know, our engineers looked at it, you know, you have an acoustical echo chamber. Well, hell yeah, I know I have an echo chamber. You know, we live it. And he said, we're going to work to get that eliminated. And then I look at a plan, and my neighbors have a fence, Pam has a fence, but in our corner, there's no fence. There's no, you know, acoustical barrier, there's no fence. So here, you know, Chris and I are thinking we're being good neighbors, we're having discussions with Josh, we're having discussions with Ned, but then, you know, when there's a plan, it's disingenuous when we're not incorporated in that process. And by, you know, not being, you know, raising, you know, up and down, emotional, oh my gosh, and being, you know, Joe Prondek's best friend and calling him up and saying, oh, I see this, and policing my neighbors, I feel like we're left out of the process. Yet, we're a huge part of that. You know, that corner, we're a huge, the winds come, we get the bobcat noise, you know, we get the truck noise, and I just think that, you know, this is where it needs to come.
Now, you make an interesting, I think that we were discussing last time that
Yeah.
if you wanted the fence, certainly the fence should be there.
Right,
And you have attached to your letter
right.
something about an acoustic fence, which looks good
Acoustical
because
barrier.
it's attached to a chain link structure, which probably is going to withstand rot better than a wooden structure.
Right.
But it's only 6 feet high, and
I recommended 10 feet. I actually did some research. I do architectural design. I work with a lot of contractors, large installations. So I put my feelers out. I made a lot of calls. And they said basically when they have large jobs, I mean, because everybody's worried about noise. I mean, not just a neighborhood. I mean, everywhere you go if you're building. Chain link fence is going to last and be the strongest. And 10 foot is what is recommended with the acoustical barrier. And with that behind it, then do a buffer of trees. So anything that would go over the 10 foot, which is usually about 2 feet, that's what they're saying, it would also be trapped in the buffer of trees. They said it really helps a lot, and I am so willing to try something that's permanent because I don't want to police my neighbors. I don't want to, you know, Josh and Maggie want to have a life. They have kids. We all have kids. You know, like I said, we've been there for 22 years. I just want to live in peace. Last summer was a utopia. I pinched myself. I just want a little of that. You know, I know there has to be a compromise, but I really feel that look at it as a commercial operation. Don't think of it as this residential buffer. It's not. You know, we have bobcats, we have trucks, we have dust, we have noise. You know, just because it's in our little armpit and it doesn't affect anybody else, we still deal with it.
And you mentioned in your letter that at a certain morning at 3:45, a large...
My wake-up call?
Large truck arrived and spent half an hour positioning
Right.
itself somewhere. Did the backup horns sound at all?
Yeah, I mean, you got an 18-wheeler pulling in, and it was that really nice night that you actually could leave your windows open. And I was like, are you kidding me? So I got out of bed, and I'm looking, and I take my dog, I flip on the floodlights, and then it shut off its motor after 20 minutes, and then, you know, it was doing a delivery. I understand they have to get deliveries. They're in business. You know, they need trees. You know, I get that, but there has to be some type of balance. That's all I'm asking.
And
Not
you
at 4 in the morning. That's not a balance to me.
No, but the fence is, of course, one of the big items in this, and their mitigation is probably the biggest item of the mitigation plan.
Right.
And so the question is, does acoustic fence
Yes.
make 10-foot drops?
Yes, and I wrote it in there. It comes 10 by 6, and it's actually applied to the chain link fence with plastic hooks. So it comes in a roll. You order it direct. You have to leave it out for about an hour, they said, till it gets, you know, a little pliable, and then you actually can roll it out and you put it right through the chain link and attach it. And it just doesn't become like a kite, because I asked him about the wind, because we do have prevailing wind, so I did say, hey, you know, what about a wind issue? And he said, absolutely not. It becomes part of the fence, basically.
Right.
The way it was
depends on
explained
how
to me.
deep the steel pilings go down.
Well, I'm
But
hoping.
it would act as a sail with wind.
I did ask that, and they said no. They're saying no. They said it actually becomes part of the fence, and chain link was the sturdiest. And I'm hoping you just get, you know, someone that knows what they're doing.
Well, it sounds good to me.
Quick question on that.
Can I say something first
Yeah,
as well?
absolutely. Of course.
This is, we've been there for 22 years. I'm Chris Stevens, by the way. We've been there for 22 years, and we went through this in '04 with different the neighbors before John and Phil had similar issues. We hired an attorney, and we tried to get it right. So this is another go-round where it's been an unpleasant experience for the neighbors that are in there. Tina and I are going to move. John and Phil may move. Pam may move. There's going to be another generation of people that come in, and they're not just going to be deaf or put up with it. It's going to be the same thing for the board. So it's imperative to get it right. The other thing is, on top of the fence, one of the biggest issues for I don't want to speak for anybody but us, is noise. And there are much quieter vehicles. Tina and I were on vacation once, and there was coincidentally enough, there was a Corona commercial. Everybody's seen the sand commercials, so they were setting up on a beach right next to the hotel we were staying at. And it had to be 40 yards away, and I was absolutely shocked at how quiet they were.
Bobcats.
They were bobcats, and they were moving sand around.
Right.
It was absolutely shocking, the disparity between what we live with and what's available out there.
Right.
So I would ask that the board look at, and I'm happy to help research that, look at the quieter version, which may alleviate a lot of the stress that's going on.
Right.
So the fence and quieter machinery, you know, I hope Thayer makes a gazillion dollars and everybody's happy, but I just want to be able to go in my backyard, and I invite anyone here to come in my backyard during the summer when the bobcats are blazing, and try to have a conversation in our backyard, which we've spent a lot of money on, with the person next to you. You cannot do it. So what happens is, instead of enjoying a summer evening in your backyard, you go inside. That's not really fair to anybody. I mean, even the Big Dig stopped after 15, 17 years. This
Right.
is just not stopping. So I urge that you get it right and make everybody.
And the hours of operation, we are not going to police Josh and Maggie. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to go out there and say, oh, they started at 7:02, oh, the truck came back at 6:15. You know, they don't want to live like that, I don't want to live like that. It's just being a good neighbor. It's just thinking to yourself, oh, you know what, home from work, maybe they want to enjoy the pool. I'm not going to, start up the Bobcat right now and do this. I'll do it tomorrow, at 10. Just striking a balance would be nice.
So just to, on the fence, you said it's the fence, then it would be plantings, and then the property line, right? So
Correct.
the plantings are between
Correct.
you and the, okay.
You got it.
All
The
right.
fence needs to come first
They're on
because,
both sides, the plantings.
Well, I just wanted to clarify what she said. I mean, did they
Correct.
have anything about the plantings on both sides being
No.
an issue? Okay,
Well,
because that's what we have in the
you're gonna
zoning, was
need
that they'd be on both
Right.
sides.
I'll take both sides.
Okay,
Screen the fence.
okay,
I mean, if you're going to give both sides, definitely I'll take both sides.
okay.
But to me, more importantly, it's the sound barrier. It's
Okay.
the sound absorption. Love to try it.
Okay.
I mean, because for us, really, it's the noise and the dust. So to me, that's blocking it. You've got sound, you've got a barrier. I mean, that, to me, I think would mitigate a ton.
And so the proposal for your neighbors, and one of the questions was whether or not you wanted a fence, because there was some confusion on that. So
Yes.
thank you for coming in and clarifying that.
Yes.
So for your neighbors, on one side, it was proposed an 8-foot wooden fence, and on the other was with the acoustical, and then the other was the current proposal is a 10-foot wooden fence, non-acoustical. You're okay with chain link and the acoustical? I just want to make
chain link-
sure.
I mean,
Whatever
wood
works the best.
fences are expensive, for one.
Okay.
They're more expensive and they break down. I mean, we just replaced our fence, it only lasts 12 years, and it was supposedly, great cedar. Chain link fences, it'll be there by the time we're gone, and then you won't deal with it again. I think chain link, economically, it makes the most sense. You can, and it'll last longer. Why deal with this again? That's what I'm trying to say. Like, can we just get it right?
We want something that will last, because
Yeah.
if we issue a permit, we don't want broken down fences coming
Definitely
up
not.
on
Exactly.
renewal.
Right.
And what do we think about the volunteering to come up with some vehicle specifications?
Right.
That sounds like a good plan, doesn't it? You're on.
Okay, thank
Good
you.
job.
Bill Clark is our general recipient of important information. Okay, now, what does the board think about fences? I personally think a chain link fence is hideous, but with,
Especially 10
you know,
feet.
once you
I've never
attach
seen
the sound attenuating material, you've got to have the screening on both sides, the vegetation, because, and a 10-foot wooden fence would be, we will get, you're going to get to comment. A 10-foot wooden fence, in my view, would not be a particularly aesthetically pleasing experience.
On the other hand,
on the other hand.
We're looking for a quieter experience rather than, I mean, I prefer wooden fences to chain link myself, but if a 10-foot chain link with the acoustical material going all the way around, buffered on both sides of vegetation, is acceptable to the neighbors, then I'm to all three sets of neighbors who would be affected, then I'm okay with it, because it will be buffered by the trees. If they would prefer a wooden fence, will a wooden fence and the acoustical material adhere as well? I mean, it sounds like this material is made specifically for chain link fences.
It does, no, it does go on a
Okay.
wood fence, but in his experience, it's something that, 6 years, 7 years, it breaks down. Where the chain link, he said, I can still go and it's still
Okay.
there.
I mean, it's a black blanket, which is effectively, by the looks of things, I have never seen this product. It appears to be covering up the aesthetic of the chain link.
Right.
Which will then have
Plantings on
somewhere
either
between
side.
15 and 30 feet of trees in front of it, depending on which side you're on.
Right, exactly.
I think the blanket effectively goes away.
Yeah, you look
with-
through the
with all
trees and it's- yeah.
I do want, I mean, everyone in the room knows what that is, right? That post right there is 10 feet. It doesn't even fit in the room. So I just want everyone to be aware that
Right.
that's a tall chain link or any kind of fence, and
It's a
these
tall
are your
fence.
backyard. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think we want to be very clear that that's a big fence.
You want to make sure you're not going to see it, because...
Oh, that's cool.
No, I work on construction sites.
It's the sound we're worried about, not what we're looking at. I mean,
Absolutely.
If there's nothing there, we're looking at the big side of
That's
a
fine, because
warehouse.
Yeah. I'll
I've
take
never
the
seen
10.
a 10-foot fence. I've worked on...
I have at prisons.
I've worked at sites at Harvard, where the people in Cambridge are crazy. I've worked at sites at MIT, at Tufts, to buffer sound. I've never even seen a 10-foot fence, never. But as long as you can't see it, you'll be all right. But if you have to see a 10-foot chain link fence, you're going to feel like you're living next to a prison.
I think in this matter, we want to make sure that everybody,
Knows what they get.
Exactly,
Okay.
that's exactly what.
That's, you're going to go far and wide to find a 10-foot fence.
How tall
Anyway.
are the prison fences? Are they,
I think about 30, the wall is about 30 feet. I think.
but they do have chain link fences on certain prisons, and it might be worthwhile, yes,
You also have the issue that I heard each of the three neighbors in the back say, we want a continuous fence. You really don't want a continuous 10-foot fence, because you just trapped every animal that's coming either into there or into your yards from getting out, because they're not jumping that fence.
No, right now, the deer, though, they come right through my yard, but they
Right.
come up my driveway, and the fence, it would be fine. It goes right up, they go right up Pam's property.
Go right into Pam's property.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna continue going that way. I mean, they don't go over to there, it's gravel, and there's not vegetation for them to eat. They burrow and they
But
nest.
that's,
So, Bill, I
that's
mean-
now. There will be new plantings in there.
Bill, we've heard that concern before. I mean, would you, I don't know much about how to avoid the entrapment of animals. Is it sufficient to have the fences overlap with a, 3-foot opening or something
Yeah.
with a stagger?
You could
You know,
stagger
it
them, or you
provides
could make
a,
them 8 feet. They can hit it, they can go.
I'm not
over
gonna
the
get
fence.
deer can clear 8 feet.
8 feet. MWRA has them around their reservoirs at 8 feet because they can clear it. You cannot go, that's what I'm not gonna make.
I don't think, you don't want to wake up to that.
No.
I'm just looking at the 8-foot length versus the 10-foot length. How do you guys,
Right.
I mean, the staggering's the other option, or creating
rather
a
not
break, but if you
stagger.
create a break.
Honestly, I'd rather not stagger. I think it's more effective if it is a continuous run. I mean, you're talking about acoustics, so I'd rather
Yeah.
have no breaks where the acoustic can go in. I mean, acoustical barrier works better if it's continuous.
But you can overlap and you've attained the same
True.
thing.
Yeah.
That's, I think, what we were
They
weren't
may-
suggesting
Overlap
break. I think I was
fine.
suggesting
They need to be able
overlap.
To
Like
get to the
the
back side of
something
that
like this.
fence,
Okay,
to get to the trees out there
Fine.
too.
Yeah.
okay,
So you need to have some type of opening or something in there.
fine. Overlap, I understand. I thought you meant an opening as in a...
No.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with the opening.
Right,
is
so it has to
exactly
be
as you say.
staggered or
Okay.
overlap.
All right.
So,
Either that or a gate. And you don't want
you
a
gonna
gate.
teach a deer how to open a gate?
No, but you're going to wind up, you've got plantings on the other side that belong to Thayer.
Right.
As they take those plants out and put in new ones,
Yes,
how do they get to them?
right.
All right, let's see what Mr. Oldfield says about this fence. Stick around. We
you want me to
may, you might as well,
I'm not going anywhere, but.
no? We want to, see what we can do about the fence tonight.
Good evening, folks. Josh Oldfield here. I want to give you a little history regarding my relationship with the Stevenses. I met with Chris and Tina about 4 or 5 years ago in their kitchen to help come up with a neighborly solution for their concern. And the remedy, a deal that we struck between 1, 2, 3, and myself, person to person in their kitchen, was met. We agreed with the Stevens to go onto their property, plant at no charge 16 cypresses 12 to 14 feet tall at no charge. They're in place today. They're brown on the back side facing our property line because of the natural buffer that exists. There's a natural buffer between the cypresses that are now 20 feet tall on their back property line and our property line. There's a natural buffer of 45 feet that exists as we speak. So it goes from a 20-foot planting that we planted free of charge to a 45-foot natural buffer to an evergreen grow-out area that starts with 20-foot evergreens and goes down to 4-foot evergreens that is 70 feet deep. So, call me crazy, but that's an aggregate of 70 plus 45 of buffer plus the plantings I planted free of charge on their property. So everyone's talking about, well, they feel left out of the process. I don't get it.
Well, they're talking about noise.
Right, but if you
But
study,
admittedly, you've mentioned that you've made efforts to control the noise
Correct.
through natural vegetation.
correct.
But they
So I
they
just
take the
wanted-
position that the noise is getting around the
I'm just,
vegetation.
all I'm just stating are the facts. You guys are here to help come up with a solution for all of us. So the way we felt was, we were in agreement with a solution at that point, based on what they told us.
That was 7 years ago.
Yeah, well, whatever it was, but,
Trees are dead.
Right.
well, I'm just saying, at the
I-
time,
No,
that-
I totally agree with everything you're saying, except it was 7 years ago.
Yep.
And since then, I mean, you have to look at your business model. You have grown substantially every single year, and the noise has increased with
Well-
that growth.
If it weren't,
So-
Josh, we wouldn't be sitting here. We'd be
There's-
like, you know what?
No,
That's
understood.
those guys' problem, the
No,
sound is
but-
gone.
but if I can.
That's not the case.
Okay, no,
Right.
but you just heard, they lived in Utopia last year.
It was a cease and desist.
No,
It was
the Utopia was, we
our
moved
cease
the
and
piles,
desist.
we moved the
No,
piles.
it was a cease and
Okay,
desist.
Just please let me
There were no
talk.
bobcats. It
Please
was
let me
beautiful.
talk.
Yeah.
We moved the piles to the other side of the barn. We implemented what you guys and us came up with, what the zoning plan did. So the stuff got moved away from their property line, and in their mind,
Wait.
and in their
Let's-
mind, Utopia was created.
Well, but they say recently Utopia has disappeared, and
And landscaping still has not returned.
We haven't been
and we have
landscaping on the
had
property.
bobcats all last year. So there's inconsistency in the testimony.
The
and we've been
question,
extremely
the
patient through
question
this
is,
whole entire
the
process.
question is the extent, because if you do landscaping from your premises, you're going to be doing more bobcat work, you're going to be bringing in more materials, you're going to be bringing in more trees, you're going to have more noise than you currently have, because you're going to have, well, you can't say that because you have to. You can't run a nursery and then say, we can add a landscaping business on top of that without increased noise. I mean, you've got more trips, you've got more materials, you've got more employees, you've got, I mean, your trucks are down in Canton now. If you bring them home, how can you possibly not have more
And
noise?
they were home, and then I called Prondak, who went over there and counted the trucks were supposed to be in Canton, and there were more there, and then you pulled them around. But I just want to go, not to digress, but Maggie, this is not us against you. You know, you come to the table, you move your chair over there. This is, we want to find a solution here. You know, you won't even look at me. We can talk to Josh. You know, Josh came over, you've never been over to our house. You know, why wouldn't you even sit next to me? This is a process. We're trying to find a solution, not a we suck. I'm sorry. I'm kind of sick of this. Like, let's make this work.
I have never, ever done that. That is not
Then
in
why
my
don't you sit
nature.
next to me and let's work through this process and let's get a solution that everybody agrees on. All right?
I'm not here to argue.
I'm not here to argue either. I'm here to work together, okay?
And we have been working together for the past year, and we have come up with this plan for the past year.
All right, I'm a little frustrated
I guess,
because
as am
when
I.
I look at the plan and then being left out of the plan, you know, we had, which I feel, I don't know if you agree, Josh, but I felt like we had good discussions on what we felt was going on our property and for you to address them. Ned called me up with every metaphor under the sun. We want to put the genie on and back in the bottle. They want to be better neighbors. What can we do? What can we do? What can we do? Okay? Now, this wasn't 7 years ago. This was last year.
Correct.
So you knew as of last year that there was a problem. So to go back 7 years, we have a problem. Let's find a solution. I don't want to go back and forth with, you know, this and that and what trucks. Let's just move forward. We keep going back.
I agree, that's why Chris and I
You
spoke
know,
today.
And I'm sorry I raised
I
my
am
finger,
moving
but
moving
I'm
forward.
sorry I did that to
While
you.
we're
But I'm
attempting-
just frustrated on going
Right.
back. Can we
Can-
just
can-
go forward?
Well-
Can I interject something? Maybe we could get to a resolution here. Can you put up a 10-foot chain link fence?
Yeah.
Can you put a continuous?
What?
No.
Around the whole property?
No, from here to here.
Just the L.
Depending on where
Fill
it
in the
goes,
space
I just
between-
have to think about the logistics, where it's going. Yes.
What we're trying to do
But
is...
what I
is-
would
well, no,
suggest
but-
is, a chain link fence is an okay thing to do. The only problem I have, I would propose a 6-foot high fence there. Just listen, hear me out, please. Because the sound of, as Tina knows, the acoustic fence comes in 10-foot heights. So,
6 by 10 will-
It's
6 by 10.
Yeah, it's 6
What
by
we're
10,
trying to
not
do
10 by
here,
6.
just so we can maybe get onto a positive page.
But we
is
thought-
that we
okay,
understand,
yeah.
we understand the nursery is currently making a fair amount of noise in its operations. And if the landscaping were to be brought back, it would add more noise, and it would be even worse than it is now. What we're attempting to do, if we grant a permit, is to make the combined operation quieter, significantly quieter than the nursery operation is. In other words, by the fence, by the traffic movements, by the use of equipment, by the other mitigation measures, to make the entire operation, if we were to give a permit, and that, of course, is a question. If we don't give a permit, presumably they won't do the mitigation. But that's not our department. What we would try and do is, if we issue a permit, make sure the permit ends up with a better overall, a significantly better overall situation, because that is the only way it's really going to work, I think. Isn't that what our mission is here?
I can honestly say, I just wish that through this whole I thought that I had addressed the issues with the Stevenses because of the planting and the rearrangement, configuration. I figured all those things were enough to address the situation, and it just caught me off guard when the letter came out. And I'm not here to, I know it all started with that one truck, but I want to defend that. Well, I just want to say what happened. That's all I want to do. And as I explained to Chris, there's no way a truck cannot get into our facility after hours because we have automated gates. And I know the code, Maggie knows the code. So there's no way a truck comes in at 3 o'clock in the morning to offload. What had happened was he came in after hours. He left Oregon, traveled 3,200 miles, got here after hours. We did not offload because it was after hours. The plants were in a refrigerated truck. The thermostat went off, the reefer kicked in, and that's what caused the noise. So it was a perfect storm of events that happened that shouldn't have happened. It probably happened it happened since 1990 4 to 6 times. So it's not a regular occurrence, and the Tevens can testify it's not a regular occurrence. It did happen, there's no doubt about it, but that's the reality of the situation. So we don't promote truck traffic to come in at 3 o'clock in the morning. They can't get in at 3 o'clock. I live next door, I'm the first one in, I'm the last to leave, I'm the guy who closes the gate. I'm the gatekeeper. So that's how that works. But again, I'm not condoning it, but that's what happened.
Okay.
Why don't we try to conclude
The
what we're
fencing
going to do
portion.
with the fence?
Yes.
I think that, that's just what we're going to try and do.
Oh, boy, Mike.
And we have Mr. Rowe who wants to add a word. Why don't you come up and do so?
Actually,
And people can move sort of back and forth from the audience to the table if they like.
I would prefer, John Rowe, 23 Parkwood Drive, I would prefer a 10-foot cedar fence that's put in the ground with cement on the posts, or pressure-treated posts put in the ground with cement, and to have the sound barrier put on that. Also, I think that if we do get a wooden fence, there has to be something in there that Thayer Nursery has to maintain it. It must always be in proper order, and I think it needs to be inspected to make sure it is in proper order. Additionally, I believe that the fence, right now where they have it on the plan, it is on the other side of the gully that they dug, that all the water from their property drains into and then subsequently drains into my property. That fence is in front of what they call the old log line. I believe at some point after 1987, all of this land was filled in, and then they built that log line, and they planted hemlocks on the Thayer side of the log line. So what they're proposing to do is to put the fence on my side of the hemlocks, which is significantly lower than the construction yard, which is on the other side of the hemlocks. And I believe what I would like to see is a continuous fence that goes all the way to the end of my property line, in front of the hemlocks, and behind the circus tent that they put up this weekend. Circus tent is another thing we'll talk about later, but since we're talking about fences, I think it should go all the way. Can I show you on the chart?
Yeah.
What? It's on here. Better on here. Who drew this on here, Bill, do you know?
It's what?
Who drew this on here? This is not the fence that they represent. They're representing the fence here.
Yeah.
The green line. Who drew this fence?
I thought it was yours.
It was mine. Maybe I did, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I did, I don't know.
Oh, is this
Looks like a
the
fence.
neighbor's alternative plan that you asked for in
Oh,
the
maybe
meeting
that-
before last?
That's what that is,
That's what
Yeah,
that is, you're right.
this is the alternative plan that you asked the neighbors to
Okay.
present
John,
on
you can-
behalf of the applicant.
you can,
Here's the actual plan here.
I think I brought the large one with me.
This is a good start, the alternative plan. that we put together?
I don't think I've seen the alternative plan. I
You
think
did.
that's-
We had it last meeting.
We had it last meeting.
I don't have it, he has it. It's the one that
I didn't
moved.
see it in this size.
That's the only size we had.
I guess okay. I know that what I feel about this, but people should look at it. There is, the press mentioned that I sort of said the alternative plan was no good, and
I don't think that was your wording.
but
Look,
I
I'd say
think that
something about
if the board feels the alternative
I don't
plan
think we
is
need
a
to
good
revisit
plan.
it.
Can we, at the moment, just
State-
finish
stay
up
with
on
one thing?
fences? Yes.
Well,
Yes.
come back to the alternative
We already
plan?
talked about the alternative.
Yeah.
At the
Well,
moment,
yes, and it was highly irregular that you asked the abutters to come up with an alternative plan for the applicants. That rarely, I don't even know that it's ever happened.
All right, let's
And-
do the
and we
fences,
thought-
then
we thought you
we'll,
would
then
give
we'll,
us
then we'll go
an
back to
opportunity
the
to
alternative
explain this.
plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
All right.
Because I want to make sure that,
yeah,
Shall I show you the log line on this, or on, I'll show Mike.
You're over here someplace, huh?
Yeah, right here is where the hemlocks are. Then the ditch was built so that all the water funnels here into a ditch that they dug here on my side of the hemlocks. And where they're going to put the fence is on this side of the hemlocks. Then there's a ditch, and then there are some dead shrubs that they had put on the other side of the ditch. I think they died because of the water. So I believe that the fence should go in front of the hemlocks, all the way across here, and an L like this. And this should be a permanent buffer, not a grow-out area or shrubs put there in burlap bags that are going to be moved back and forth constantly. And if it's a permanent buffer, then there's no need for anybody to go back there. But we must address the drainage problem. We cannot leave all of the drainage from the property going into that ditch. You know, we have got a lot of problems to solve here.
we need to get to the drainage, so I think the drainage
You
comes
talked
after
about
the
the drainage.
fencing,
That's
yeah.
another
We need, yeah, that's clearly
But
been an issue that has to be fixed.
The fence only goes in this plan to here. My property ends here. It should go all the way to here, and I would like to see it closed off.
Okay. But at a minimum to the end of your property line,
Yeah,
correct? Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And I don't believe that we need any kind of overlap. It should be a continuous fence, and my preference is wood.
Yours is the wood,
It-
okay.
It has to be maintained, and the posts have to be pressure-treated wood, put in concrete.
So then we should also hear from Ms. Lepori.
If she has something
Ah,
to
there
say.
you are.
Come on
On the
out.
fence.
Actually, I need to refer, I'm Pam Lepori, 44 Street.
You want the alternative plan? Would you give this? Why don't you take that
This, we're gonna use this for
with you?
display?
We've got two of them.
Oh, okay.
So Pam, the question would be what material you want in the fence, with chain link or the cedar?
All I want to know is what's going to be most effective.
Okay.
I came home yesterday, and through the weekend, I came home yesterday, went upstairs around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and went to my closet, which is on the south side of my house, and I could hear the bucket dragging in my closet. It was terrible. Something that could be done, raking, they dragged the bucket, I'm sure you guys heard it too. It was in my closet on the second floor. I want quiet, I want peace, I don't know, I'm not a fence person, I don't know if the chain link is gonna be the best solution. Clearly, I think the wood's gonna be more aesthetic. And of course, you all know, I really have a problem with the location of the land care yard. And I'd really like to know why this alternative plan won't work.
And we know you want to discuss it, but we want to at least get the
So the
fences.
fence.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, the fence, I understand proposing the fence 15 feet, I believe, from the lot line. But there's also the drainage there. So that is, I don't know, about 3 feet wide. So there's a piece of land, the drainage ditch, and probably about 5 feet of dirt to plant trees. So I really think the fence needs to go beyond 15 feet. So here's the drainage ditch.
Is that the fence?
That's
fence-
what we're
No,
proposing.
yeah, the fence is agreed.
I thought that
We
had discussed that-
we changed this last time. You're supposed
I thought that the fence
to,
had gone further in.
yeah, so you're supposed to
What
have
is it-
plantings
what does
between
the note
you
say, Tim?
and the fence.
With respect
And then
to the-
plantings on the other side, and I've got it scribbled here.
But I need,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to know.
I thought that had been
was it-
shifted.
Because there's a drainage ditch there that's
It
probably
seemed to
this
me that
wide.
we brought it out so that that we had much more room on the other side of the
Yeah.
fence for planting.
I don't have it all beautifully done, but I know we had, I know we had added plantings between.
Because as it looks right now, I see where the fence
Yeah,
is
we
proposed.
said this.
There's markers
I think
there.
they're
They
need
said they would do
to
this.
shift it. Yeah.
They would take the plantings and they would bump them out in that area.
But they're also going to put plantings on their property
Oh,
side
that is,
between,
they were always shown on just the quarry side of the fence.
right, exactly.
On their property.
Right.
But on her side of the fence.
Right, so they're going to have double, and they're going to bump it out, and then they're going to narrow the area next to the barns, so nothing can come through on that side, yeah.
I'm still confused about how much land there is to plant.
We haven't seen the new drawing, I think they're probably waiting till we come up with
Well, I
everything
see
and do the new
markings
drawings.
To where the existing fence is 15 feet.
I imagine they
back on
haven't
the
moved
property.
those yet, so can we get a clarification on that? So are you, because we're obviously going to be talking about a lot of
And
different
why don't you
changes.
take this plan and go down to that chair at the other end of the table, because people are going to mistake you for Mr.
planning board
Duffy.
member.
Oh, I have one.
Is it let me just get this clarified. Is it your intention that after we go through all of these, we'll get revised drawings that show where everything is? Okay. So you
So what
haven't
did you
changed
board
anything in
discuss?
response?
Here's
Okay.
what I had come up with as of today.
Okay.
That I think is a viable solution for both parties regarding the Lepori property line. So we have the property line. Let's start with the property line and work our way towards our property. So we have the property line. Then we have a 4-foot swath of existing gravel for drainage. Then so there's 15 feet between the property line and the proposed fence line. So that leaves a planting bed between the backside of the gravel and the fence line. And then on the backside,
What's the width?
So that'd be 11, if you've
so
done the
that'd be
11 feet, okay.
11 feet.
Okay.
And then the fence line.
Yep.
And then on the back side of the fence line, we have another planting bed of 6 feet. And then in an area centrally located in the land care area is an area 60 feet wide by 30 feet that comes out from the property line as a belly, just like that.
Are those permanent plantings?
Yeah.
Are those permanent plantings or in burlap?
That would be a grow out area as well.
So that's not a permanent thing,
So
so
the
they're not
perm-
going to get
the-
very high.
But
The
it is-
permanent plant, there will be a permanent planting of the
Correct.
arborvitae's in the
Correct.
6-foot area.
The ones on the straight line
Yeah.
are
How
permanent,
deep-
the ones
So
in the
there's 10
belly.
feet to plant trees there?
There's 6 feet on the back, on your side of the property is 15, well, actually, on our property, between the property line and the fence, there's a total of 15, minus the 4 for the drainage, so it leaves 11 foot of, take 10 feet worth to bury.
So does the drainage go right to my property line? I don't think there's,
It's recessed back about a foot.
okay, so now we're in 5 feet.
So, no, yeah, okay, 5 feet.
Okay.
That's grow out.
So 10 feet of
There's a total of
planting.
15 feet.
So how wide is this table? You're going to get one row of trees?
That's
That's
10
10
feet.
feet.
So that's one row of trees.
But it's gonna be double barreled on both sides of the
But
fence.
you're getting a row on your side, We're
But the
getting-
other side is-
we're no, no, we
is
get a
not
row on your
permanent.
side, we're doing a fence, we're doing another permanent row on our side.
And then a bump out in the middle of the
and
landscape.
The permanent trees need, on our side, about 6 feet, so that there will be a 6-foot permanent planting.
And how high are these trees?
They're on the
That's,
plant
they're on the
list.
plant list.
And to Brian's comment, so Brian, I know you were concerned about the distance between the back of the barn and the planting bed. That leaves us about a 12-foot bed or path there
Right.
at the most and then we could connect that bump out bed. It's gonna return back to the 6-foot bed, sort of in that area, so we can sort of have a narrow channel there, but then we'll bump it out to
30 feet, you said.
bottleneck it right there to a gate.
Yep.
So
Great.
how do we determine what fence is going to be more effective? How
We
how are
get
we
our
going to determine-
professional staff, yes, can you tell us?
Yeah, can I speak to that in a second?
Sure.
Hi, Scott Johnson from 11 Hillside Street. I think that, I have no vested interest in what type of fence is here, pro or con. And I think that looking at consensus is a smart thing to do, but more than that, looking at a professional. Tina she's worked for world-class architect firms, and she's done research on this, and she is an abutter. Right, well, I'm just clarifying that for the record. And she did a lot of research on sound attenuation and aesthetics. She has a beautiful home. The aesthetics are incredible. And she stated here earlier in the meeting that the metal fence with the sound attenuation is a better idea than the wood. And I think you got to agree on which fence you have between you. But it's pretty clear that you got somebody that's on your side of the table that's done a lot of research. And I think that I would personally defer to a world-class architect if it were me. That's all I had to say about it.
Well, I mean, I don't want to look at a chain link fence either, so that I have one row of trees that I'm going to see a chain link fence through.
Well, based on, have you seen the acoustic fence material?
Fence you're looking at.
Pam, have you seen this? I'm just curious, because it appears, again, I haven't seen the material, it appears to be a black blanket material effectively, so it doesn't sound like you're going to see either fence.
Well, as long as I have a guarantee not to see them.
I mean, honestly, right? It doesn't sound like you're going to see the fence. You're going to see the blanket, you're just not going to see the material.
Sit through the tree.
Talk about the
You
acoustic.
see a straight 200-foot line.
Are you an acoustic?
John Rowe, 23 Parkwood Drive. I believe that the acoustic blanket goes on the Thayer Nursery side of the fence. I don't believe it goes on both sides of the fence.
On the wood.
Yeah. So what the neighbors will see is the cedar fence that hopefully is stained, a dark stain, and maintained every year. I have a cedar fence that I have stained pretty much every year with a Benjamin Moore solid latex stain. And if you have your fence with pressure-treated posts in cement, and you have it stained every year or every 2 years, the fence should really last probably at least a couple of decades, maybe even more. But it has to be maintained.
Okay, and just one other, along Forest Street right now, I've been looking at a huge pile of gravel all winter, and I see that there's no fence extending over to what it looks like Josh's fence. And what is the purpose of that area there? What are you going to be doing?
The
with
fence
it?
would extend beyond that.
No, I'm talking across Forest, so when you're driving up Forest right now where that big pile is, what are you going to be storing in there?
Again,
As discussed last time, it was basically continuing our grow-out area, and it's a storage area of tables for the nursery.
So that's a storage area. I would
But
like
blocked
the
by a
fence.
fence.
Yeah.
Well, there's no fence proposed there. I'd like the fence too. Want me to show you?
Go down to Forest Street.
You want it to go
we don't
down
see
and terminate at Forest Street or turn the corner at
Turn the
Forest Street?
corner.
Okay.
So we don't see the tables and storage and all the things being stored there. I'd like the fence extended parallel from Forest Street.
I mean, just as we go through the process here, obviously, we have to do our own cost analysis to see if this is a deal breaker or not.
Look,
Well, I don't, nobody wants to look at your storage area.
Mr. Chair, just to add some clarity, so the applicant actually submitted a letter from Cascade Audio Engineering. It's dated December 19th, 2014. The last line of the letter states, these reduction amounts are the minimum reductions if the material is used by itself. Installing the material on a wooden fence only improves the reduction. So hopefully that answers the question.
The wooden fence
But it
would be
doesn't
better.
say the difference.
Acoustically.
Yeah.
Acoustically, the wooden fence is better, according to this letter, which is from their sound engineer.
Economically, the chain link,
Yeah,
acoustically.
which is why on all the
wood.
construction sites, you see chain link fence about 6
Exactly.
feet high, because
Right.
that's the cheapest way to
I'm
do
not
it.
worried about their
Right.
expense.
I can get a sample of,
I'm not worried about
which
that,
I
yeah.
can bring or send to the board if you'd want a sample of what the acoustical barrier, the material actually is, if that's helpful.
They're recommending the same material, by the way, this
There you
letter,
go.
so.
That would be fantastic if you could get a piece of
Okay.
material. That'd be great. Thank you.
It looks like what you see in a tennis court.
Right,
basically.
yeah.
It's just, it's about a 1/4 inch thick, and it looks like.
And it has to have the ability to sway in the wind, so
Right.
it absorbs the noise waves.
But it sounds like it's the same material that's been proposed, it's just whether it goes on a chain link or a wooden fence.
Correct.
So, okay.
So are
The
we
most
still-
expensive component of all this stuff is that
Is the,
stuff.
is the fence,
So-
yeah,
No,
exactly.
it's the acoustic.
It's the
Acoustic
acoustical
fence.
stuff.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So do you have a preference on the chain link versus the wood? I mean, we should ask. We know one person prefers the wood, and one person.
What I'm gonna propose is a chain link with acoustic fence or a cedar fence.
Okay, that answers that question?
So there's another option.
Yes.
So can I ask why it's a
The
10
cedar
foot
fence
in the
is the wood
back and
fence.
only an 8 foot along my
Yeah,
side?
pressure, actually, it's pressure.
That has
yeah.
been a question going on, that's what we're trying to figure out. is
And I
what-
thought we answered that
Yes,
last
Yeah, we're
we
just going
did.
back.
was,
Yes.
we discussed that last time, that the Johanning property line, it sits at a lower elevation, and so they need a taller fence.
I think,
He
I don't
did
I don't
that.
understand that, but
Yeah, he
that seems backwards to me,
He
but whatever.
understands the topo.
But I think then the question becomes if the planning
If
board.
you're lower,
Well, it's not just
you
that.
really
if-
need less fence.
If the,
You're higher, you need more fence.
if the
Well,
planning
the
board
noise is coming from
requires,
higher.
I don't understand.
but if the planning board requires a fence to go all the way around, it would make sense,
For it to be
for
the
all
same.
sorts of reasons, for the fence to be the same height. So the question is, in
Well,
addition to
actually, it
material,
shouldn't be, it should go from 8 to 10 if that's the case.
8 to 10, up and around.
The-
Yes.
So.
I interrupted you, sorry.
Is there a condition that we can put in place that is, this letter basically requires or recommends a certain decibel
Right.
transmission. At some point, can we go that route?
Yes,
And just
absolutely.
say, this is your requirement, achieve it.
I think the neighbors would probably want a little bit more specificity about how but what the decibel level allows you to do is it allows you to check for enforcement.
Gives you enforcement.
Yes,
You have to
exactly.
get your ambient level, and right now, the ambient level is so.
Does the building commissioner have a- does the building commissioner have a meter?
Yeah, that's,
You talk to the building inspector,
building
he
commissioner
won't
won't do
You
it.
won't do it?
Bill says you don't have it.
If he's not going to do it, then we're not going to do, I mean, we
All right, fine.
can't impose
Then
it,
fine.
so.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got another comment.
I want to reiterate that I would prefer a 10-foot cedar fence. I think, Emily, you wrote down the specifications?
I did, yes.
With the acoustic blanket. And it should be placed in front of the hemlocks
Yep,
and.
pressure treated posts.
Yeah,
yep.
you know, I think it probably would be good if we could have a site visit, so that you could see
And here.
this and hear it. No matter what we do with this acoustical fence, it's not gonna stop the beeping of the backing up of the trucks, the tractor-trailer trucks, and the bobcats, which is constant.
For the fumes.
And it doesn't stop the air pollution. We have, they have all diesel equipment that idles constantly, and if, you know, when the air is heavy, the diesel exhaust permeates my entire yard, basically the entire neighborhood. I would encourage you to come up there some morning when the air is heavy and just witness the air pollution. Well, there's noise and there's air pollution. You know, the air pollution is bad for my health.
And somebody in our packet submitted a drawing with prevailing winds, but it didn't say who that that was from you? Okay. I just wanted to make sure, it wasn't actually attached to the letter, so I wanted to make sure I knew who it came
Can you just
from.
source that for us? What was the source of that? Just because that was one of my questions, actually.
That was me walking out to my property and taking basically my iPhone and taking where the wind is and
Okay.
pointing it at it, and it comes in that direction.
Okay.
And doing that for a few days.
Okay,
You know,
thank you.
And I
think we
knew it
can-
was there, but I just basically had to, like, I wanted to document it in north, south, east, and west.
If you actually go on to the Blue Hills Observatory website, they actually do by day and by wind speed every day.
Yeah,
And so
I
the
thought I'd
prevailing
seen one,
wind
yeah.
is generally from the west. And we can get that from the National Weather Service in Taunton.
That would be the opposite, in all due respect, that southwest would be the opposite of what you showed.
No,
From the southwest.
We are east of the property.
Yeah.
We're east,
It's
and the
coming
prevailing
from
wind
west,
is from the
southwest,
west
it's coming this
to
way,
the east.
To the east. It's coming right over.
I just wanted to know who had submitted it, so I knew where it was coming from. Thank you.
There, because Pam's property line is our southern property line.
I've had that for 2 minutes.
So, Mr. Chair, it's getting close on to 10 o'clock.
No, we've got, we're going to go.
I just want to know how you want to proceed going forward.
I want to finish the fences, and I want to find out about whether or not the board was
just
in
make a
agreement
vote,
that
move
we
on.
should leave the lot where it was beforehand.
Okay.
I think we can
Since,
take those two votes.
My town manager seemed to think that I made that decision myself.
I don't think it was a unilateral decision.
I don't think it was unilateral either, so, but we can certainly
We can
clarify that.
discuss it, but I don't think it was
Yeah.
unilateral.
All right, so let's finish up the fence first, just so before we start jumping around to other
Could I-
discussions. Where do we want to be?
Well,
I just-
I mean,
Can I say something?
finish this fence?
we're going to try and finish the fence, but we're going to try and figure out what to make it with.
Well, we're gonna do that right now.
But we need to have this
Do you
discussion.
have a problem with a 10-foot fence?
Yes,
Okay, what size fence would you like?
8 foot.
8-foot fence? There's no compromise with the 8-foot fence.
No, we need a 10-foot fence. What we really like is a wall, you know.
Like the Great Wall of China, but that would.
No, you know, Cheryl Tagayas, last year,
Put on the plan, the fence has to be complete, has to make a corner, draw it on the plan. If that's what you want to submit an 8-foot fence, and we'll have to vote on it, that's all.
I will say one thing, a 10-foot.
can't go on forever.
Wooden fence, I think is gonna be hard to find. I think.
It's gonna be hard to
I
find
think
any
a
10-foot fence.
wood
Chain link,
fence.
any
A chain
anything.
link,
You're gonna have to have
there-
a special order chain link to get 10 feet.
Tennis court fence might be 10 feet.
And they probably have to special order it, and they don't get it every day.
Yeah,
They don't
but
see it
I-
every day.
can
There
I
are a lot
say
of tennis
something
courts.
about the fence? In something that really concerns me is that the purpose of this zoning bylaw change was to protect the neighbors and to protect the residential character of the neighborhood. And it is not to save the Oldfields money. You know, I really could, if the fence is too expensive, then the alternative is you can run your commercial landscape construction company in a commercial zone. We have to look at, this planning board should be charged with making sure whatever is approved is protection for maintaining the residential character of the neighborhood and for the protection of the neighbors. And Alex, you wrote the zoning bylaw, and you stated at town meeting, and you've stated many times, that that's the purpose of this
With all
bylaw.
due respect, I don't think we're gaining anything by spending hours on end explaining the charge of the planning board. We should know our charge by now. And we're not accomplishing by spending hours on end talking about the same thing over and over and what our charge is. We know what our charge is.
Well, I don't, I have, can I
Well, that's
comment
your
on
damn
that?
opinion.
Can I comment on that? I have concerns that the planning board, specifically Emily, has contributed to the writing of the application of Thayer Nursery.
You want to say something?
But can I finish? You know, probably issuing special permits should not be with the planning board. It should be with the zoning board of appeals where it stands today. And I believe that the zoning board of appeals would never participate in writing an application. And where I think the lines can be blurred here, is that your job is always to help write zoning bylaw changes. This is not a zoning bylaw change. This is an application for a special permit that the applicant's attorney and Alex Whiteside wrote the zoning bylaw together. And so the applicants should know what's in the zoning bylaw, and we continue to have an application that has false, information that's incorrect. There's a lot of information that's incorrect in the application, and there are things that they're asking for in the application that are strictly prohibited by the existing zoning bylaws, as well as the zoning bylaw that allows them to ask for this. The last application, how many applications have we had? I don't know, I've lost count. The last application, or maybe it was the one before, introduced all of this language about the artisans market, amplified music. All of this stuff is prohibited. It's clear in the new zoning bylaw. Why are we entertaining an application that is clearly insufficient and asks for things that are not allowed in the current zoning, nor is it allowed in the zoning bylaw that allows them to apply for apply for this. Furthermore, as you are all aware, we don't believe that the applicants are even eligible to apply for this. So, Emily, you forced my hand. I don't believe that you should be entertaining, revising, or writing anything for the applicants. And I'm sorry, but you have forced my hand. Is a conflict of interest.
So, Mr. Rowe, you will grant that I have the right to respond, of course.
Of course.
So I want to explain what I did, because I think what I did was critical, and I think it's important that people understand my motivation. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. I agree with you that a lot of the information in the application is not either what it should be or where it should be. And I had made my concerns known over several meetings that certainly the part of the application, section 2, where the applicant requests what they're actually applying for, was not consistent with the zoning. And Maggie Oldfield sent me an email after, I think it was the meeting of the 26th, saying, "You've said this again and again, I don't understand what you're saying." So the planning board has already accepted an application from the applicants. We won't go into whether or not they're the applicants or not. Let's just stick with what we have so far. It has been the planning board's practice, once we've received an application, to request additional information on points that are not clear. Certainly, section 2, that should be what the application is for, should be very clear. And as I said, I reiterated my concerns. So Ms. Oldfield asked me to say, look, what exactly are your concerns with this? So that's what I did. The application's already been written, certainly not by me. All I did was clarify, look, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is inconsistent, this is inconsistent, this information doesn't even belong in this section. I've made that available to members of the board. I sent it to Tim and asked him to distribute it to your lawyer and to yourselves. I'm not participating in writing any applications, but I do reserve the right to clarify when I don't understand what the information is. I still have concerns. So I sent off those comments. The Oldfields sent us some revised information, some of which was responsive, some of which was additional. I still have concerns because what I saw still didn't meet what I was concerned about. I have concerns about some of the provisions that they've made in here, but the trouble is we're not, as a board, getting to those. I've got a couple of paragraphs later on in this application I would really like to discuss, but we're not getting to them. We need to be able to go through point by point these mitigation points, point by point the other elements that are in the application, and get them clarified so that the board understands what it is we're actually going to be voting on. And once we get through these mitigation points verbally, we're going to need a document that says, okay, we've agreed to do this with the fences, we've agreed to do this with the drainage, which, believe me, is still an issue that's out there, we've agreed to do this with the hours, which is a huge concern that I've had, and everything else. We're not at that point yet. We need to get to that point. We absolutely need to get to that point, and we need to move this conversation along to get there, because otherwise, we're going to all be here in August, September, October, and I don't think any of us want to be here. I think we want to understand what it is that is being requested from the abutters in the neighborhood, offered by the applicant, and then discussed by the planning board as to, is this reasonable? It may be that we get to a point where the planning board says, hey, we want to see X, Y, Z based on what we've heard, and the applicant says, no way. May get to the point of saying, the applicant says this is what we want to do, and we say, not going to happen. But we're not there yet.
Okay, if
There
I
are
could
too
just
many-
respond.
there are too many
If I could
questions.
just, may I just respond?
Make
We
it
are on
quick.
what, I will make it quick. We will agree to disagree on that point. I don't believe it's anybody on the planning board's responsibility to rewrite their
I
applicant.
did not.
Or to revise their
I
applicant.
did not.
And Emily,
asked for
you have made
clarification.
yourself perfectly clear. I've been to every meeting except for the last one. You have made yourself perfectly clear to me, and I believe to everybody else, what your concerns were with the application. The applicant's counsel has been here. He has heard all of that, and we get rewrites that don't address any of your concerns. My attorney meeting with all of, and wrote these down, all the deficiencies, and we still have not seen any of that addressed. At some point, the board needs to say, hey, you're not listening, and so we're going to vote on the application, it's completely deficient, we're going to deny it, and reapply. You know, at some point, you talk about this thing going on and on, it's going on and on because the application is clearly deficient, and we don't see, revision after revision, anything getting cleared up.
All right, now,
Oh,
getting
that's
back
good.
to the fence. I think that a 10-foot cedar fence is going to be pretty hard to find, especially with a post that's going 4 feet into the ground. That's a significant timber. I think that, no, please.
Just one point.
Mr. Rowe,
The
no.
applicants,
Mr. Rowe,
the
no.
applicants
No,
in their
Mr. Rowe.
application asked for a 10-foot fence. That's in their application, so they can find.
We can specify fences. I think that it's probably got to be a chain link fence. That's my view. I think that the cedar fence, I haven't seen good luck with cedar fences lasting very, very well, especially if they have to be set in concrete, because setting them in concrete really does not help.
No. The gentleman at the fence company told me, don't set it in concrete.
Right.
Because the water will seep down between the concrete and it'll rot out a lot quicker. Don't put it in concrete.
Well, exactly, but if
So
you,
we can't
if
go
you
through
do, you've got to get that, you've got to get those supports well structured so that the fence doesn't blow over. I think that it's got to be just for myself, I think it's got to be a chain link fence with sound attenuation and with the landscaping, which is going to block it
On both
significantly.
sides.
On both sides.
But the landscaping, I have a question, is that a permanent, or are they?
Permanent.
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 We would require permanent on both sides.
It did.
And the abutters get a say in the aesthetics of it.
And the fence, both sides of the L, so along all 3 property lines, are the chain link at 10 feet. We're not changing the
Two
height.
property lines.
Well, no, we've got an L, so it's 1, 2, 3
Three
property lines.
pieces of property.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. So they're all 10 foot high. We're not changing the height of the fence anywhere? I'm
know that Ms. Lepore wants
10 foot?
the same treatment. So I think that unless the board, I'm happy to say 10 feet.
All right.
I just don't, I'm afraid I can't go with a cedar fence because I don't think it would work.
Okay. So
That's
10
my
foot high.
view.
10 foot high, chain link, sound attenuation, permanent landscaping, both sides,
That's,
the whole length. Are we going to have a opening for the deer? We're going to?
No.
Okay, no deer opening.
No.
Okay, but bear in mind, this is,
This is on the applicant to resubmit it, right?
What?
We're not, are we requiring that, or is this going to be something the
So we-
applicant?
We're
puts on?
we're not voting.
suggesting
We're
it, right?
basically,
We're
we're
suggesting it.
basically agreeing that this seems to
Be
be
the
the
easiest way
sense
to
of
get
the
to the next
board.
point.
Great.
The next point is, I don't want this relocated yard to keep coming up. I don't think the plan is workable, but if anyone else does, they should say so. And if they don't, then we have a sense of the board that the yard should stay where it is and see how it works. If it doesn't work, then we're about to, if it doesn't work, then
We're about to
address that in the future.
Well, the other thing is, we're about to move into some of the other mitigating factors. We may find as we move through those that there are continuing
We
issues.
have, Alex, we have a letter that wants to be put into the record, so.
I'm going to pass it down.
All right, this is a letter from Pamela Lepore. Tim, make it part of the record and distribute it to the,
Copy still of the board
to
members.
the board members.
I think we should say, first of all, because it was raised as an issue, that we do appreciate the fact that the abutters looked at other possible sites and brought it forward to us. I don't think that was properly recognized, that they spent their own time and effort to do that, and we appreciate the fact that they did that.
I
That should
think
go on
that's
the
right.
record.
I
Yes.
think that's right, and if we didn't make that clear, we should.
Could I simply speak on the alternative plan? One of the things I think that all of us believe is that the offensive activities are not fairly distributed. They all end up in the southeast corner, which we all have to live with. We really believe that some of that needs to be relocated to other parts of the property, like behind 217 Hillside Street. Because every truck needs to be on our side of the barn. Now, I'm not talking about parking right now. We'll cover parking. But there are lots of areas of the nursery where the offending activities could be placed. And we really think that somebody needs to look at the other locations, like 217. Like, there's a compost pile that's located on the Tevens and our side of the barn in the existing plan. But there's also compost over at 217. That's primarily where the compost is. So we're wondering, why do we get this compost, and what's it going to smell like? Like, if other compost is over at 217, why not move all compost to 217? Additionally, trucks. Like, does every truck and every noisy machine have to be on our property line? Does it all have to run, for 15, 20 minutes with no one in the cab? Like, do we have to get all the pollution and everything? Like, couldn't the board take a look at all the things that bother us and try to distribute them around the property in a more fair manner? Yeah, and what I'm saying is that, there are neighbors who supported the nursery 100%, went to town meeting, talked about how lovely it is, and it is lovely in places, not on our side, but it is lovely. Why can't some of those neighbors who think so highly of the operation take some of the pain away from us? Would it be wise, would it be fair to look at every offending activity and try to distribute it in such a way? I was amazed by Robert Mussey during the last meeting to say, oh, it's too close to my property. Yet he supports the nursery. I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't, but I think what we're trying to do is come up with a methodology for finding a way to coexist. And one of the ways to coexist might be to redistribute all the offensive. We can't live without the wood. It's always going to be in the barn. We're going to get that racket no matter how many magic whatevers they put around. We're going to hear that noise. John showed the clip from their own website. It makes a lot of noise. There are a lot of trucks. There's a lot of exhaust, And, the funny thing is that they showed all the inbound trucks. They don't show the outbound. For every inbound, there are going to be 10, 20 outbounds. So, there's a lot of activity with wood. And we're talking, like I mentioned the last time, about $1 million worth of wood coming in and going out. And it makes a lot of racket. So can't we take all the other things and put them in other places? Let's say that Tina, Chris, John, and I agree. We're going to take the racket of the wood. That's okay with us. Do we have to get the snowplows too? Do we have to get the smelly compost? Do we have to get everything? And what about Pam? Like, does she have to get everything in the land care yard? Do all the bins have to be there? Like, could they be someplace else? Could we distribute them around so there's less activity in every single place? Would that be possible? I think what we're trying to do is, people either love or hate the nursery, and it really depends on where you live. If you live on our side, like Tina mentioned, she called it the armpit. We live in the armpit. We live with all the noise, all the exhaust, all the smells. Let's try to get it all moved around. And if you were to say that we couldn't give it to Robert Mussey, or we couldn't give it to the Castors, or we couldn't give it to the Coles, well, then I guess I'd say it's not appropriate for a residential neighborhood. So let's try to find a more fair. You may reject this plan. That's fine. All we're trying to do is say, let's move it around and let's be fair, okay?
Okay. Now it's 10:10. We've dealt with the fence.
Do we want to comment on the plan? I mean, you wanted to put that to rest. Do we have anything else to talk about on it? I'd love to not talk about it again.
I think we're fine on the plan at the moment. That doesn't preclude us from, as we look at the other mitigation procedures that they've recommended, from taking exactly as Mr. John Henning said, are there other ways of dealing with this? Certainly, I think the question about the compost, if it's on 2 different sites, is a fair question to ask, and I think we should ask that. I don't know if you guys want to say anything more about that plan, but I think we can I think we can not go forward with this, but keep in mind the spirit of it is everything that's proposed here actually in the right space.
Well, then I would recommend, I think it's important, if I don't disagree, but I think it's important that the applicant take that under advisement as well.
Right,
because,
exactly.
As I said to Alex at the last meeting, it's nice. It's great that the neighbors took the time, and I too appreciate their efforts, and I understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the application, and we can really only consider the application. So I would ask that the applicant, to the extent that there's an opportunity to move things around,
right,
let's consider it and keep the discussion going. But I think, I hope everyone in this room agrees that we need to move this discussion.
Yes.
We've spent 3 nights on the fence.
Yes. Let's
At
move forward.
this rate, we
No, I think
have
that-
some, the
I
people have
think-
some rights
I
as
think
expedients.
I think the fence was a critical issue. I think we will be discussing mitigation which will affect the yard.
Right.
I mean, there are plenty of, the location of the yard is just one portion of the mitigation,
Yeah.
which would be involved with respect to the yard. So I don't think that, I think we'll get on with it. We'll get on to, is it C that we're?
Sure. Could we begin the next meeting with, or with either a summary from the applicant or a summary from our board of just
What we've done
where
so
we
far.
are and what we've agreed to? Because I don't think, at this point, I'm not sure if anybody knows.
I was going to actually ask, probably put it on Tim's shoulders, but if you could come up with a chart, Tim, that says this is what we've discussed and what the board thinks on that. I don't think anybody's agreed to anything, but this is what the board has thought on these issues.
Right.
And then we can just keep that chart going for the mitigation.
That'd be great.
I think that would be
Tim, I
an
have
organized way of
pretty good
dealing with
notes.
this.
If you want me to help you out with that, okay?
Yeah.
Is there a reason we're always last?
Only because, no.
Is it self-evident?
And it's a
Seriously?
valid question.
a
That is a
great
valid
question.
question, because I was sitting up here feeling really, really bad because I
Just
could
you
see
guys
the
go
clock.
first, nobody else will go.
No, it's because of town meeting. We had the articles for town meeting. I think we could continue, guys. We don't have anything else for the 14th, right? Phil, Tim, at this point?
There is a site plan approval for Brushwood Estates.
Yes.
That will only take 10 minutes, hopefully.
Yeah, that'll take 10 minutes. Could we put if we do Brushwood at 6:45, have we already moved them to a specific time? Can we start them off at 7 and not put anything else?
Brushwood
before that?
has some drainage issues, so.
Does it?
Oh, that's right, it does,
Don't
doesn't
be
it?
so,
Okay.
Well,
There is a drainage, they gave us drainage calculations, and I specifically ordered one for Mike.
Good job.
All right, well, that's good to know.
All right.
So,
I have a quick question, I promise.
okay.
So right now, is my understanding that their nursery is under the same as last season, a cease and desist?
I
Yes.
assume that that's the case.
I would
but-
assume that's the case, too.
But it wasn't, didn't come from the planning board.
Okay.
It came from the court.
We understand like you understand.
Your nursery's not under a cease and
No,
desist.
it's the landscaping that's under the cease and desist. Yeah,
No,
the nursery is.
No, I'm not trying to be like a wise guy. but
No,
you're in
I'm
the
just
same boat.
looking for clarification.
That's not
Okay,
what we do.
okay.
That's-
So
So
yeah.
the goings-on in the day-to-day right now
all
is
nursery
is nursery related, not landscaping. So
Correct.
your trucks are essentially in Canton?
Correct.
Okay. So,
And
My
Joe
question is-
Joe Fronick is aware of that.
right, so my question is, have you made any one of these improvements? Have you been doing that at all?
Yeah, we've
We've
started.
been slowly doing it, but it's
Yeah.
at our own risk, because if we don't get the special permit,
Right.
then there's no sense.
Okay,
doing
that's what I figured, I just wanted to,
So
Be
in your
clear.
back property line, we've already removed 10,000 square feet of
Impervious
impervious
soil.
stone,
Okay.
and put the grow out area there.
right,
So that happened last year.
okay.
That was that noise when you were saying the dragging that you kept hearing.
I knew that was going on from last year, I just
No,
needed,
that's what they're doing now.
right.
New stuff planted in that area.
No, that was the land care yard.
Yeah,
That was the
nothing to
land
do with
care
that,
yard.
though.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's all.
Quick question.
All right, so we're continuing this to May 14th at what, Bill? Tim?
7:15.
7:15?
7:15.
7:15?
Can we be on the next one as well, for the whole night?
Yeah,
Or
for the,
it is the next one, right?
It isn't.
After that,
the 28th?
yeah, for the whole night.
Do we have anything else scheduled for the 28th? Can we
don't
just
think
put
we're
them
gonna
on
get
at
done?
6:45?
There's no question you're going to be on the 28th.
I know,
But
the
let's
whole
get them
night.
scheduled for
I feel
6:45.
like we've been very patient through this whole entire process, and.
As have we.
Yes, but it was
Not
no
me.
fault of mine.
Not tonight.
So 6:45 on the 28th. So you'll be starting off first. We may have other things on the agenda, but you will be the first.
Could there be like nothing else on the agenda?
We'll just have to see what comes up. We will do our best. Tim, you've got that, 6:45 on the
I
28th?
know it's not known, but how many more meetings do you think to get to some type of 3 meetings? I don't know, just a
It will depend
ballpark.
on how quickly we get through these mitigation clauses on
Well, you must
the
have a
14th and
feel.
At
28th.
some point in.
No, this is actually, this particular application has had no precedent in the history of the town of Milton, as far as I can tell.
But there has been lots of other businesses in residential neighborhoods that have existing conditions that we can certainly follow, that they're busier than Thayer Nursery. So
Can we-
having a business in a residential neighborhood is nothing new to the town of Milton.
Okay, now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Yeah.